Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Headache. Brent Ramirez pressed his palm against his daughter's forehead for the third time that evening. Emma's skin burned like desert asphalt in July, yet she shivered under her princess comforter. "Daddy, it hurts," she whimpered, small hands clutching her temples. "Make it stop." 8 years old, and already she'd learned that headaches weren't supposed to last weeks. Brent had been a pharmacist for 12 years, long enough to know that persistent pediatric headaches meant something was wrong. Very wrong. "I know, sweetheart. The doctor's going to figure it out." He smoothed her dark hair, so much like his own. "Try to sleep, okay?" Downstairs, Whitney stood at the kitchen island, her blonde hair pulled into a perfect ponytail, scrolling through her phone with the disinterest of someone checking the weather. His wife of 10 years barely looked up when he entered. "She's worse," Brent said flatly. Dr. Cuevas said it's probably just stress. "Kids get stressed too, you know." Whitney's tone carried that edge it always did lately, dismissive, almost annoyed. "I've been giving her those vitamins he recommended. They'll help." Brent had married Whitney Caldwell fresh out of pharmacy school. She'd been a pharmaceutical sales rep then, beautiful and charming, with an easy laugh that made everyone in the room feel special. That laugh had disappeared somewhere around year 5, replaced by a brittleness he couldn't quite name. "Vitamins don't cure headaches that make a kid cry herself to sleep, Whitney." "Well, maybe if you were here more instead of working 60-hour weeks, you'd see she's just manipulating us for attention." She set down her phone with a sharp click. "I'm with her all day. I think I know my own daughter." "My own daughter. Not our daughter." Brent caught the pronoun, but filed it away. He was too tired for another fight. Their marriage had become a minefield of careful words and cold silences. They shared a house, a daughter, and little else. Brent had stopped trying to fix it months ago. Some things couldn't be repaired with the right prescription. "I'm taking her back to Dr. Cuevas tomorrow," he said. "This isn't normal." Whitney's jaw tightened. "Fine. Waste another copay. But when he tells you the same thing, don't come crying to me." Brent climbed the stairs back to Emma's room. She'd fallen into a fitful sleep, her face scrunched in discomfort, even unconscious. He sat in the chair beside her bed, the same chair where he'd read her stories about brave princesses and clever heroes. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister, Joanna Walton. "How's Emma? Any better?" "Getting worse," he typed back. "Taking her to doctor tomorrow. Want me to come? I could take the day off." Joanna had been his rock since their parents died in a car accident 5 years ago. She'd never particularly liked Whitney, though she'd kept her opinions mostly to herself. Mostly. Not yet. "I'll let you know." He pocketed his phone and watched his daughter's chest rise and fall. The moon cast silver shadows across her room, illuminating the collection of stuffed animals that lined her shelves, gifts from better times when Whitney had actually seemed to love their child. Something nagged at him. Dr. Burton Cuevas was thorough, one of the best pediatricians in Phoenix. If he'd recommended vitamins, he'd have been specific about which ones. Brent made a mental note to check the bottle in the morning, verify the supplement, maybe adjust the dosage. He was a pharmacist. Medicine was his language, his expertise. If something was wrong with what Emma was taking, he'd figure it out. What he couldn't figure out was the cold distance in Whitney's eyes when she looked at their daughter, or why she seemed almost eager for Emma to stay sick. But exhaustion pulled at him, and tomorrow was another early shift at the pharmacy. He kissed Emma's fevered forehead and headed to the guest room, where he'd been sleeping for the past 3 months. The house settled into silence, but Brent's mind wouldn't rest. He stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the paint, trying to ignore the feeling that had been growing in his gut for weeks. Something was very, very wrong in his home, and it wasn't just his daughter's headaches. Chapter 2. The Decline. 3 weeks later, Emma could barely get out of bed. Brent sat across from Dr. Burton Cuevas in his office, medical charts spread between them like accusatory evidence. The doctor's weathered face showed genuine concern, the kind that made Brent's stomach twist. "The blood work is puzzling," Dr. Cuevas said carefully. "Her liver enzymes are elevated, kidney function is declining, and there's evidence of neurological stress. But there's no clear pathogen, no obvious disease marker." "What does that mean?" Brent knew what it meant. He'd studied pharmacology, but he needed to hear it from someone else. It means something is affecting her system, but I can't identify what. I'm recommending we admit her for observation and more comprehensive testing. Today, if possible. Brent's hands clenched. Hospital admission. You think it's that serious? I think we need answers before we lose more ground. Dr. Cuevas leaned forward. Brent, as both her doctor and your friend, I'm telling you, something is poisoning her system. Environmental toxin, maybe, household chemicals. Or, he hesitated. Or what? Or something she's ingesting regularly. You said Whitney's been giving her vitamins. Every morning. Whitney's diligent about it, actually. More than she is about most things lately. Dr. Cuevas made a note. Bring me the bottle. Everything she's taking. I want to verify the supplements. The drive home felt like swimming through concrete. Brent's mind raced through possibilities, each more frightening than the last. Lead in the water. Mold in the walls. Something in the school. But Emma only got sick at home. On weekends. Never during the school week. Or rather, she'd started improving slightly when she spent days away from the house. Whitney was in the garage when he arrived, loading boxes into her Mercedes. She jumped when he entered, nearly dropping a cardboard box marked winter clothes. Jesus, Brent, you scared me. Dr. Cuevas wants to hospitalize Emma. Run more tests. Her face remained carefully neutral. That seems extreme. Extreme? She's lost 8 pounds in 3 weeks. She can barely stand without getting dizzy. He moved closer, studying her expression. Where are those vitamins? The ones you've been giving her. In the kitchen cabinet. Why? Doctor wants to verify them. Something flickered across Whitney's face, too quick to catch, too deliberate to be innocent. They're just standard multivitamins. From a health food store. Brent pushed past her into the house. The vitamin bottle sat exactly where she'd said, on the middle shelf next to the coffee mugs. He grabbed it, noting the label. Children's complete multivitamin with iron. But something was off. The label looked right, but the bottle felt wrong in his hand. Too light, pills rattling differently than they should. I'll drop these by Dr. Cuevas' office, he said. Now, don't you need to get back to the pharmacy? Whitney's voice had an edge. Hassan texted me asking where you were. Why the hell was Hassan Lynch, his colleague, texting his wife? Brent filed that away too. Emma's more important than inventory counts. He took the bottle and left before Whitney could protest. But instead of driving to Dr. Cuevas' office, he pulled into the parking lot of his own pharmacy. The store was closed for lunch, giving him privacy in the dispensary area where he'd spent thousands of hours counting pills and counseling patients. Under the bright fluorescent lights, Brent examined the bottle with professional scrutiny. He twisted off the cap and poured 3 tablets in his palm. His blood went cold. These weren't multivitamins. The shape was wrong, the coating wrong, the imprint barely visible but definitely not matching any children's supplement he knew. He pulled out his phone and searched the imprint code, L544. The database loaded. Acetaminophen 500 milligrams extra strength. Adult pain reliever. Not toxic in single doses, but given to a child Emma's weight. Every single day for weeks? His hands shook as he poured out more pills. Not all of them were L544. Some were different shapes, different colors. He cataloged each one with growing horror. Diphenhydramine, antihistamine, sedating, pseudoephedrine, decongestant, stimulating. Something he couldn't immediately identify. Small, white, unmarked. This wasn't a vitamin bottle. It was a cocktail of random medications, some contradicting each other, all potentially harmful when mixed and given to a child over weeks. Brent's pharmacist brain kicked into clinical mode, protecting him from the emotional devastation trying to break through. He cataloged symptoms against medications. Headaches, acetaminophen overdose could cause rebound headaches. Dizziness, the antihistamine decongestant combination. Liver problems, chronic acetaminophen use. The neurological issues, what was that unmarked pill? He took one of the unmarked tablets to the analysis station and ran it through the spectrometer. The machine hummed, processing. The results loaded. Ambien, zolpidem 10 milligrams. A sleeping medication. Adult dose. Being given to an 8-year-old child. The room spun. Brent gripped the counter, forcing himself to breathe. This wasn't accidental. You didn't accidentally fill a children's vitamin bottle with a dangerous mix of adult medications. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone was slowly poisoning his daughter. And there was only one person who gave Emma those vitamins every single morning. His wife. Chapter 3. The Truth. Brent didn't go home that night. He couldn't. Not yet. Instead, he sat in his car outside the pharmacy until dark, staring at the bottle of poison that he'd been trusting his wife to give their daughter. His mind spiraled through denial, confusion, and finally, cold fury. Why? The question consumed him. People didn't poison children without reason. Even monsters had motives. His phone rang. Whitney's name flashed on the screen. He rejected the call. 3 more calls came in rapid succession. Then a text. Where are you? Emma's asking for you. You need to come home now. The manipulation was obvious now. The concerned mother act. How long had she been playing him? Another text from an unknown number. This is Dr. Cuevas. Whitney called saying you disappeared with Emma's medications. I'm concerned. Please call me. So Whitney was already building her narrative. Brent the absent father. Brent the unstable one. He called Dr. Cuevas from a blocked number. Burton, it's Brent. Don't tell Whitney you heard from me. Brent, what's going on? She's worried. The vitamins aren't vitamins. They're Ambien, acetaminophen, antihistamines. A mix of adult medications that have been poisoning Emma for weeks, maybe months. Silence. Then, are you certain? I'm a pharmacist. I identified every pill. Someone refilled a children's vitamin bottle with medications that would make a child sick, chronically sick. And Whitney is the only one who gives Emma those pills. Jesus Christ. Dr. Cuevas's voice dropped. Brent, if this is true. It's true. I have the bottle. I can prove it. Then you need to call the police. Now. And get Emma away from Whitney immediately. I will. But first I need to understand why. And I need evidence that's ironclad. Because if I accuse her and she talks her way out of it, Emma goes right back in her care. What are you going to do? Something I should have done weeks ago. Actually investigate my own wife. Brent ended the call and drove to Joanna's apartment. His sister answered the door in yoga pants and an old college sweatshirt, her dark hair messy. One look at his face, and she pulled him inside. What happened? He told her everything. The pills, the poisoning, the systematic destruction of their daughter's health. Joanna's face cycled through shock, horror, and finally, rage. That fucking psychopath, she breathed. Brent, we have to get Emma out. Tonight. We will. But I need your help first. I need to get into Whitney's computer, her phone, her life. I need to know why she's doing this. You think there's an accomplice? The thought had been growing in Brent's mind since Hassan's strange text to Whitney. Maybe. Or maybe there's something I'm missing. Insurance policies, debt, an affair. Something that makes poisoning our daughter seem like a solution. Joanna grabbed her keys. Then let's go find out. They drove to the house, separately. Whitney's Mercedes was gone, probably out searching for Brent. He let himself in with his key, moving through the dark house like a stranger. Everything looked normal. Clean counters, family photos on the walls, Emma's backpack by the door. A perfectly normal home hiding a perfectly horrifying secret. Her office, Joanna whispered. Whitney's home office was typically locked, but Brent had installed the doors himself. He knew where she hid the key, inside a decorative vase on the nearby bookshelf. The lock clicked open. Inside, Whitney's laptop sat closed on the desk. Brent powered it on, thankful she'd never bother with a password at home. The screen glowed to life. He opened her browser history. What he found made his blood freeze. Search after search after search. How much acetaminophen before liver damage? Symptoms of chronic drug poisoning, undetectable poisons for children. How long until Ambien causes permanent damage? Life insurance payout child death. Munchausen by proxy diagnosis. The dates went back 6 months. Methodical. Researched. Premeditated. But it was the email correspondence that confirmed his worst nightmare. An open email thread with someone named Douglas Gentry. From Whitney Caldwell Ramirez, she's getting weaker. Doctor wants to hospitalize her. From Douglas Gentry Good. Once she's admitted, they'll find natural causes for organ failure. Keep giving her the pills until then. The policy pays double for hospitalization. From Whitney Caldwell Ramirez, what if Brent figures it out? He's not stupid. From Douglas Gentry, then we frame him for it. He's the pharmacist. He has access to all these drugs. Who do you think they'll believe? Joanna read over his shoulder, her hand covering her mouth. Oh my God, Brent, this is attempted murder, he finished. For life insurance money. He clicked through more emails. Douglas Gentry was Whitney's former co-worker from her pharmaceutical sales days. The affair had started 18 months ago. The insurance policy on Emma, a $500,000 policy Brent had never agreed to, his signature forged, had been taken out 14 months ago. They'd been planning this for over a year. The front door slammed open downstairs. Whitney's voice carried up. Brent, I know you're here. Your car's down the street. Brent quickly plugged a flash drive into the computer and copied everything. Emails, browser history, files, evidence. Upstairs. Joanna hissed, pointing to the window. Fire escape. They climbed out onto the metal platform, just as Whitney's footsteps thundered up the stairs. Through the window, Brent watched his wife enter her office, see the open laptop, and pull out her phone with shaking hands. He couldn't hear what she said, but he could read her lips. He knows. We have a problem. Brent and Joanna made it to Joanna's car without being seen. As they drove away, Brent clutched the flash drive like a lifeline. What now? Joanna asked. Brent's jaw set with cold determination. Now I protect my daughter, and then I make them pay. The police. Eventually. But first, I'm going to ensure they can't escape this. I'm going to trap them so completely, there's no way out. His voice was steel. They wanted to poison Emma slowly, make her suffer, profit from her death. I'm going to return the favor. Brent. They researched Munchausen by proxy. They planned to frame me. They systematically poisoned an 8-year-old child for money. His hands gripped the wheel. I'm not just calling the cops and hoping the system works. I'm making absolutely certain they face consequences. Real ones. Joanna studied her brother's face. The face of a father whose child had been attacked, whose trust had been violated, whose family had been destroyed by greed. Okay, she said quietly. What do you need me to do? Help me get Emma somewhere safe, and then help me set the trap. The pharmacist in Brent knew exactly how to create the perfect dose of revenge, and he was going to make them swallow every bitter pill. Chapter 4. Safe Harbor. Emma was asleep in Joanna's guest room, finally peaceful for the first time in weeks. Brent watched his daughter's chest rise and fall with steady, healthy breaths. No more poison. No more vitamins. He'd picked her up from the house at 3 a.m. while Whitney was passed out from the sleeping pills she'd started taking. Emma hadn't questioned it, just wrapped her small arms around his neck and whispered, Are we having an adventure, Daddy? Yes, sweetheart. An adventure. Now, in Joanna's kitchen, Brent spread out everything they had. The flash drive contents printed across the table. The bottle of fake vitamins in an evidence bag. Medical records from Dr. Cuevas showing Emma's declining health. Bank statements showing the forged insurance policy. It should be enough. But Brent knew the system. Whitney was beautiful, charming, and convincing. Douglas Gentry would have alibis, explanations. A good lawyer could create reasonable doubt, claim the emails were taken out of context, suggest Brent was the actual poisoner trying to frame his wife. You're overthinking this, Joanna said, pouring coffee. The evidence is clear. Is it? They'll say I had access to all these drugs. I'm the pharmacist. I could have filled that bottle myself and planted evidence on Whitney's computer. He ran his hands through his hair. They researched framing me, Joe. They have a counterplan. His phone buzzed. 16 missed calls from Whitney. 5 from Hassan. 3 from Douglas Gentry's number. Not that Brent knew who he was officially yet. A text from Whitney. Where is Emma? What have you done? I'm calling the police. Let her call, Joanna said. The truth is on your side. But Brent's mind was already 3 steps ahead. Whitney would cry, play the worried mother, claim Brent had a breakdown and kidnapped their daughter. She'd have witnesses, Hassan, her friends. She'd crafted a narrative. He opened his laptop and started digging into Douglas Gentry's background. Former pharmaceutical sales executive, currently consultant for medical insurance companies. Divorced twice. Current address in Scottsdale. Several LLC companies registered under his name. One company caught Brent's attention, Gentry Medical Consulting. He clicked deeper. The LLC had received payments from multiple insurance companies over the past 3 years. Large payments. Consulting fees for what? A darker pattern emerged. Brent cross-referenced death certificates in Arizona with Gentry's company payments. Of the 32 clients that Gentry had consulted for in the past 3 years, 11 had children who died within 6 months of the consultation. All ruled natural causes. All with life insurance policies. "Oh my God," Brent whispered. "This isn't Whitney's first rodeo. It's his." Joanna looked over his shoulder. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Douglas Gentry is a professional. He helps people murder their children for insurance money, makes it look natural, and takes a cut. Whitney's not the mastermind. She's his latest client." The realization made Brent's stomach turn. Emma wasn't just a victim of her mother's greed. She was a mark in a serial killer's business model. "Then we go to the FBI," Joanna said firmly. "This is bigger than local police." "And say what?" "I have suspicions based on public records and correlation. They'll investigate, eventually. But how long will that take? Months? A year?" Brent shook his head. "Meanwhile, Gentry and Whitney lawyer up, destroy evidence, and maybe walk." "So what's your plan?" Brent stared at the evidence spread before him. The pharmacist in him saw it clearly: the diagnosis, the treatment, the cure. Douglas Gentry had poisoned 11 children, possibly more. Whitney had poisoned Emma. They'd researched exactly how to do it, how to get away with it. They'd studied poison. It was time for them to taste it. "I'm going to give them exactly what they tried to give Emma," Brent said slowly. "But I'm not going to kill them. I'm going to trap them in their own lie, make them confess to everything, and ensure they can't escape." "Ow!" Brent smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "By making them think they've won, and then turning their own plan against them." He pulled up Whitney's email again, reading the correspondence with clinical detachment. They'd planned to frame him. They had a whole strategy: plant evidence, create witnesses, build a narrative of an unstable husband who'd poisoned his own daughter. "If they want to frame me," Brent said, "I'll let them try. But I'll control every piece of evidence they think they're planting. And when they reveal their plan, they'll be confessing to their own crimes." Joanna frowned. "That's risky. What if it backfires?" "It won't, because I'm going to have backup the whole time, federal backup. I just need them to commit to the frame-up on record." He pulled out his phone. "First, I call my lawyer. Then I contact the FBI with what we have on Gentry. Then I set the trap. And Whitney. Whitney is going to think she still has the upper hand. She'll think Emma is coming home, that I'm backing down, that her plan is working." His voice hardened. "And when she and Gentry try to finish what they started, I'll be recording every second." Over the next 3 days, Brent became someone he barely recognized. The careful, methodical pharmacist transformed into a strategist. He met with his lawyer, Marcus Webb, who immediately got a protective order for Emma. He contacted the FBI with his evidence on Douglas Gentry, triggering an investigation. He hired a private investigator to document Whitney and Gentry's movements. But he also did something more dangerous. He called Whitney. "Brent, thank God," she answered, voice dripping with false relief. "Where's Emma? Is she okay?" "She's safe. And I know what you did." Silence. Then, "I don't know what you're talking about." "The vitamins, Whitney. I had them analyzed. Ambien, acetaminophen, antihistamines. You've been poisoning our daughter." "That's insane. Those are vitamins. If there's something wrong with them, maybe you should look at the pharmacy where you work. Didn't you bring home those bottles?" The counter-accusation. "Right on schedule. Did I also write those emails to Douglas Gentry? Plan the insurance fraud? Research how to poison children?" Her breathing changed. Fear or calculation, he couldn't tell. "You hacked my computer. That's illegal. Nothing you found is admissible. Maybe not in court, but it's admissible to Child Protective Services, to Emma's doctors, to everyone who needs to know you're a danger to our daughter. If you accuse me publicly, I'll destroy you. Douglas has connections. We'll prove you're the one who poisoned Emma, had a breakdown, and tried to frame me. Hassan will testify you had access to all those drugs. Your own colleague. There it was. Hassan was their inside man, their witness. Probably paid off or coerced. Why? Brent asked quietly. Why Emma? Why our daughter? Whitney's voice turned cold. Because I'm done being broke while you slave away at a pharmacy, making pennies. Because Douglas showed me how easy it is. Because Emma was always more yours than mine anyway. The admission was chilling in its honesty. No remorse. No maternal grief. Just cold financial calculation. You won't get away with this, Brent said. I already have. You can't prove anything without evidence. That's inadmissible. And when Emma comes back home, and she will, the courts always favor mothers. I'll finish what I started. Maybe more carefully this time. Maybe with your help, since you'll be in jail for her murder. She hung up. Brent stared at his phone, Whitney's words echoing. Then he pressed stop on the recording app. Got it, he said to Marcus Webb, who sat across from him. Full confession, threats, admission of intent to continue harming Emma. Marcus smiled grimly. That'll play nicely for the FBI, but you know she'll claim coercion, say you manipulated her. That's why this is just step one. Brent pulled up a new email draft, addressed to Douglas Gentry from a burner account. Step 2 is making them think I'm broken, that they've won. And step 3 is the trap, Marcus finished. Is the trap, Brent agreed. He typed carefully, crafting a message that would read like desperation. Mr. Gentry, I know who you are and what you do. I have evidence against Whitney, but you're right. I can't use it without implicating myself. I want to make a deal. You leave Emma alone, I give you the evidence to destroy, and we all walk away. If you don't agree, I'm going to the FBI with everything, including your other clients. Meet me to discuss terms. He hit send. 20 minutes later, a response came. Midnight. Desert Ridge parking lot. Come alone. Brent showed the email to Marcus. Think he'll actually show? He's arrogant enough. Men like Gentry think they're smarter than everyone else. Marcus leaned back. But you're not actually going alone, right? Of course not. I'll have the FBI, my investigator, and you on standby. Plus, Brent pulled out a small device, audio-video recording equipment, provided by my investigator friend. And if Gentry doesn't confess, if he's smart enough to keep quiet, Brent's smile turned predatory. Then I activate Plan B. But something tells me Douglas Gentry likes to gloat. He's been getting away with this for years. He'll want to brag, explain how clever he is. They always do. The trap was set. Now, they just had to spring it. Chapter 5, The Meeting. The Desert Ridge parking lot was nearly empty at midnight. Brent sat in his car, watching shadows move between street lamps. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his hands were steady on the wheel. A black BMW pulled up 3 spaces away. Douglas Gentry stepped out, mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of practice smile that probably worked on desperate people. He was handsome in a slick way, with graying temples and cold blue eyes. Brent activated his recording devices, one in his shirt pocket, one in his watch, one in the car's dash cam. Redundancy was everything. He stepped out of his car. Mr. Ramirez. Gentry's voice was smooth. I appreciate you being reasonable about this situation. Situation? Brent kept his voice level. You mean the attempted murder of my daughter? Gentry chuckled. Such dramatic language. Whitney was simply administering supplements that didn't agree with your daughter's system. Tragic miscommunication between spouses. Miscommunication, right? Like those emails planning her death were miscommunication. Emails that you obtained illegally. Gentry stepped closer. You're a smart man, Brent. You understand that your evidence is worthless. Hacked computers, stolen files. Inadmissible. But what is admissible is your access to all those drugs. Your prints on that bottle. Your colleague Hassan's testimony that you've been stressed, unstable, talking about financial problems. Hassan's lying. Is he? Or is he just a concerned co-worker who noticed warning signs? Gentry's smile widened. The narrative is already built. Struggling pharmacist, strained marriage, underwater financially. Decides to kill his daughter for insurance money, but has a crisis of conscience at the last moment. Tries to blame his innocent wife. It's textbook, except it's not true. Truth is malleable in court, Mr. Ramirez. I made a career of demonstrating that. Gentry pulled out his phone, scrolling. I've helped 12 families resolve their financial difficulties through unfortunate childhood illnesses. All natural causes. All careful. Whitney was actually my sloppiest client. She got emotionally involved with me, which complicated things. But even sloppy, we're still going to win. 12 families, Brent repeated, making sure the recording caught it. 12 dead children. I prefer to think of them as solutions to complex financial problems. Gentry was enjoying this, showing off. You'd be amazed how many parents are drowning in debt, one tragedy away from freedom. I simply facilitate that tragedy. For a reasonable fee, of course. You're a serial killer. I'm a consultant. Gentry stepped closer, his breath visible in the cold night air. And you, Mr. Ramirez, are going to give me that flash drive with Whitney's emails, delete any copies you have, and sign a statement admitting you poisoned Emma in a moment of financial desperation. In exchange, Whitney will provide testimony that you're a good father who made a terrible mistake, and we'll recommend reduced charges. You know, maybe 5 years, out in 3. And if I refuse, then Emma disappears while in your care, her body shows up with lethal doses of drugs you had access to, and you spend life in prison for murder. Whitney plays the grieving mother, collects the insurance money, and moves on with her life. With me, the casual way he described murdering Emma made Brent's vision blur with rage. But he forced himself to stay calm, to let Gentry talk. Why are you telling me this? Brent asked. Why not just kill me too? Because you're useful as a patsy. Dead, you're a victim and police investigate. Alive and convicted, you're a solved case. Much cleaner. Gentry checked his watch. So do we have a deal? Just so I'm clear, Brent said slowly. You're admitting you helped 12 people murder their children for insurance money. You're admitting you plan to kill Emma if I don't confess to attempted murder. And you think you're going to get away with it. I know I'm going to get away with it. Because I'm smarter than you, more connected than you, and I've done this successfully for 3 years. Gentry's smile was pure arrogance. Men like you, good men, family men, you think the system will save you. You think evidence and truth matter. They don't. Money matters. Connections matter. I have both. You're right about one thing, Brent said. I'm a good man, which is why I'm not going to let you hurt my daughter. You don't have a choice. The parking lot flooded with light. 6 FBI vehicles surrounded them, sirens wailing. Agents poured out, weapons drawn. Douglas Gentry, FBI, get on the ground. Gentry's face transformed from smugness to panic in seconds. He spun, looking for escape, but agents already had him surrounded. What the? You wore a wire. 3 wires, actually. Brent pulled out his phone, showing the live stream to the FBI. They've been listening to every word. Your 12 murders. Your plan to kill Emma. Your entire confession. Special Agent Marissa Ochoa approached, flashing her badge. Mr. Gentry, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, 12 counts of suspected murder, insurance fraud, and quite frankly, being stupid enough to confess to a federal crime while being recorded. As agents wrestled Gentry to the ground, his eyes locked on Brent. Whitney will still walk. You can't prove she did anything without my testimony. Don't need your testimony, Brent said coldly. She called me 3 hours ago with her own confession. I recorded that too. And right about now, agents are arresting her at her friend Brianna Stevenson's house, where she's been hiding since I took Emma. Gentry thrashed against the handcuffs. You set us up. You set this whole thing up. I'm a pharmacist, Brent said quietly. I understand dosage. Treatment. Cure. You poisoned my daughter, tried to frame me, and thought you were smarter than everyone. I just gave you enough rope to hang yourself. Agent Ochoa nodded at Brent. We'll need your full statement, but preliminary, you did good work here. That recording is going to put both of them away for decades. What about Hassan? He was going to lie for them. Already in custody. Turns out he accepted a $50,000 bribe to provide false testimony. That's obstruction of justice. He's facing charges too. As they led Gentry away, still screaming about lawyers and rights, Brent felt the adrenaline drain from his body. It wasn't over. There would be trials, testimonies, media attention. But the immediate threat was gone. His phone rang. Joanna, Emma's asking for you. Did it work? It worked. They're both under arrest. It's over. Thank God. When are you coming back? Soon. I just need to. He paused, watching the BMW being towed away as evidence. I need to see where Hassan lives. Brent, no. The FBI has him. I know. I just want to talk to him. 15 minutes. Agent Ochoa was watching him. Brent met her eyes, and she gave a small nod. She understood. Some things needed to be said. One conversation, she said quietly. Supervised. 15 minutes. They drove to Hassan's apartment in separate cars. The FBI had already searched it, found the bank deposits from Gentry, found emails confirming Hassan's betrayal. He sat on his couch, head in his hands, while two agents stood guard. Hassan, Brent said. His colleague looked up, shame and fear mixing on his face. Hassan Lynch had worked with Brent for 7 years. They'd shared shifts, covered for each other, talked about their families. Brent, I swear I didn't know they were going to hurt Emma. They told me it was just marriage trouble, that Whitney needed someone to confirm you were stressed. For $50,000. Brent's voice was flat. You were willing to lie under oath and send me to prison for $50,000. I have debt, man. Gambling debt. I was desperate. I was desperate too when my daughter was being poisoned. I didn't betray my friends. Hassan stood, took a step forward. Agents tensed, but Hassan just held out his hands, pleading. What do you want me to say? I fucked up. I'm sorry. If I could take it back. You can't. Emma almost died because you were willing to lie for money. Brent stepped closer. You worked in a pharmacy, Hassan. You knew the oath we took. First, do no harm. I didn't harm anyone. You were going to help frame an innocent man for attempted murder. That's harm. Brent's voice stayed calm, controlled. The only reason you're not an accessory to attempted murder is because I stopped them before they finished. Hassan's face crumpled. What happens now? Now you spend the next few years in federal prison for obstruction of justice. You lose your pharmacy license. You lose your career. And you live with the knowledge that you almost helped kill an 8-year-old girl for money you've already spent on cards and horses. Agent Ochoa touched Brent's shoulder. Time's up. As they led Hassan away, the former friend called back. I really am sorry, Brent. Brent didn't answer. Some apologies meant nothing. Some betrayals couldn't be forgiven. He drove back to Joanna's apartment as dawn painted the sky orange and pink. Inside, Emma was awake, eating pancakes with her aunt. She looked pale, but healthier than she had in weeks. Daddy, she jumped into his arms. Aunt Jo says we're having a longer adventure. Is that true? Yes, sweetheart. A longer adventure. Just you and me for a while. Where's Mommy? Brent's chest tightened. That conversation would come later, carefully, with child psychologists and support. For now, Mommy's away. But you're safe. I promise you're safe. Emma studied his face with those two wise eyes. Am I going to get sick again? Never. Those vitamins are gone. You're going to get better every day. She hugged him tighter. Good. I was scared, Daddy. I know, baby. I know. Joanna mouthed over Emma's head. What now? Brent looked at his daughter, then at his sister, then out the window at the rising sun. Now we heal, he said quietly, and we make sure they can never hurt anyone else again. Chapter 6. The Aftermath. The trial of Whitney Ramirez and Douglas Gentry became national news. The vitamin murderers, the media called them, splashing their photos across every outlet. Brent refused most interview requests, focusing instead on Emma's recovery and preparing his testimony. Dr. Burton Cuevas provided expert testimony on Emma's medical condition, how the random cocktail of adult medications had systematically destroyed her health, how much longer she might have survived if Brent hadn't discovered the truth. The jury sat in stunned silence as he described the calculated cruelty of slowly poisoning a child. Brent testified on day 4. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, court watchers, victims' families from Gentry's other cases who'd finally gotten answers about their own lost children. Mr. Ramirez, the prosecutor asked, when did you first suspect something was wrong? My daughter complained of headaches. They got worse, not better. As a pharmacist, I knew persistent symptoms required investigation. Brent kept his voice steady, professional. What I found was a systematic attempt to kill my child for insurance money. The defense attorney, a sharp woman named Gloria Kent, tried to shake his testimony. Isn't it true, Mr. Ramirez, that you had access to all the medications found in the vitamin bottle? That you could have planted them there yourself? I could have, Brent agreed. But I didn't. The browser history on my wife's computer, the emails with Mr. Gentry, the recorded confessions, they all prove who actually poisoned Emma. Recorded confessions obtained through deception. Obtained through giving guilty people enough rope to hang themselves, Brent interrupted. My wife admitted she'd been poisoning our daughter. Mr. Gentry confessed to 12 other similar murders. Those facts don't change regardless of how the recordings were obtained. Whitney sat at the defense table, her beauty dulled by prison jumpsuits and stress. She tried to claim coercion, mental illness, manipulation by Gentry. But the jury had heard her voice on those recordings, cold, calculating, expressing no remorse. When Whitney took the stand, she cried convincingly. I was depressed. Douglas took advantage of me. He manipulated me into believing this was the only way out of our debt. I never meant to actually hurt Emma. The prosecutor played the recording. I'll finish what I started. Maybe more carefully this time. Whitney had no answer for her own voice. Douglas Gentry's defense was even weaker. His lawyers tried to claim the FBI had conducted an illegal sting operation, that Brent had entrapped him. But the recording was clear. Gentry bragging about 12 murders, threatening Emma's life, confessing to a serial pattern of killing children for money. The FBI had exhumed bodies from 8 of his previous cases. Toxicology reports found similar drug cocktails in 6 of them. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Brent sat in the courtroom as the verdicts were read, one after another. Conspiracy to commit murder. Attempted murder. Child abuse. Insurance fraud. For Whitney and Gentry both, the charges stacked up like gravestones for the children they'd harmed. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, addressed them both. In my 30 years on the bench, I have never seen such calculated, cold-blooded evil. You didn't kill in passion or desperation. You killed slowly, methodically, making children suffer for money. You are predators of the worst kind. She sentenced Douglas Gentry to life without parole on multiple murder charges. Whitney received 45 years for attempted murder and conspiracy. As guards led them away, Whitney turned back once, her eyes finding Brent. She mouthed something he couldn't quite read. Maybe sorry. Maybe damn you. It didn't matter anymore. Outside the courthouse, victims' families approached Brent. Parents who'd lost children to mysterious illnesses, who'd blamed themselves for years, who'd finally gotten answers. Thank you, a woman named Margaret whispered, tears streaming. My son Tyler. We thought it was just bad luck. We never knew Gentry had consulted with my ex-husband right before Tyler got sick. You gave us the truth. 8 families. 8 children who'd been murdered by Gentry's schemes. 8 families who'd finally gotten justice because Brent had been smart enough, careful enough, to trap a serial killer. But Brent couldn't celebrate. He thought of the 3 other children whose bodies hadn't provided evidence, whose deaths might have been natural. He thought of the families who'd never know for certain. Dad! Emma's voice cut through his thoughts. She ran to him, now healthy and pink-cheeked, her headaches gone. 3 months of recovery had transformed her back into the energetic child she'd been before Whitney's poison. Hey, sweetheart. Thought Aunt Jo was going to keep you at the park. We wanted to be here when it was over. Joanna approached, her hand on Emma's shoulder. How are you feeling? Tired? Relieved? Brent picked up Emma, holding her close. Ready to go home. Home was a new apartment on the other side of Phoenix, away from the house where Whitney had poisoned their daughter. Brent had sold everything, started fresh. The pharmacy had welcomed him back, though he'd requested fewer hours to spend more time with Emma. Some things were more important than money. As they drove home, Emma chattered about her day at the park, about school starting soon, about normal childhood concerns. The trauma therapist said she was doing remarkably well, all things considered. Children were resilient. But sometimes Brent caught her staring at pill bottles with distrust. Sometimes she had nightmares about feeling sick. The scars were invisible but real. That night, after Emma fell asleep, Brent sat on his balcony with Joanna. They shared a beer in comfortable silence, watching the city lights. "You did good," Joanna said quietly. "You saved her. You stopped a serial killer. You got justice." "I almost didn't," Brent admitted. "If I'd trusted Whitney, if I hadn't checked that bottle, if I'd waited even a few more days. But you didn't. You trusted your instincts. You were smart and careful and brave." Brent took a long drink. "Hassan got 10 years. He's appealing. Fuck Hassan. He chose money over a child's life. I keep thinking about the parents who hired Gentry. Not Whitney. She was gone the moment she agreed to hurt Emma. But the others, were they all monsters? Or just desperate people who made evil choices? Does it matter? They killed their own children, Brent. There's no justifying that." He nodded, but the question haunted him. The nature of evil, the choices people made. Whitney hadn't started as a monster. She'd been a woman he loved, who'd loved Emma once. Somewhere along the way, greed had poisoned her more thoroughly than any drug. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Webb. Appeal filed by Whitney's defense. "Don't worry, it'll be denied. You did everything right." Everything right. Brent thought about his choices. The recordings, the trap, the calculated way he'd manipulated Gentry and Whitney into confessing. Some of his methods had been legally gray, ethically questionable. But Emma was alive, and 12 other children finally had justice. "No regrets?" Joanna asked, reading his expression. "Some. I wish I'd figured it out sooner. I wish Emma hadn't suffered at all." He paused. "But regrets about how I stopped them? No. They deserved everything they got. That's my brother." Joanna clinked her beer against his. "The badass who took down a serial killer." Brent smiled despite himself. "I'm not a badass. I'm a pharmacist who got really angry." Same thing, apparently. They sat in comfortable silence until Joanna headed home. Brent checked on Emma one last time, watching her sleep peacefully. No headaches, no poison, just dreams of childhood adventures. He protected his daughter. He'd stopped monsters. He'd earned this peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Emma's therapy, the ongoing legal appeals, rebuilding their life. But tonight, in this moment, they were safe. The pharmacist had prescribed the perfect dose of justice. And some medicines Brent thought tasted bitter going down. But they cured the disease. Chapter 7. The Appeal. 6 months later, Brent stood in his pharmacy, counting pills with the same methodical precision he'd always used. But now, every bottle made him pause. Every prescription made him double-check. The trauma of what Whitney had done lived in his hands. Brent, his new colleague, a young woman named Molly Glass, touched his arm. "You okay? You've counted that bottle 3 times." "Sorry. Just careful." Molly nodded with understanding. Everyone at the pharmacy knew his story. They'd seen the news, the trial, the aftermath. Some treated him like a hero. Others looked at him with pity. Both reactions felt wrong. His phone rang. Marcus Webb. "Brent, we have a problem." His stomach dropped. Those words never meant anything good. "What kind of problem?" "Whitney's appeal is gaining traction. Her new lawyer filed a brief arguing that Douglas Gentry coerced her, that she's a victim of psychological manipulation. They're calling it battered person syndrome, even though there's no evidence Gentry abused her. That's bullshit. The recordings are being challenged as inadmissible under a new interpretation of consent laws. It's a long shot, but Judge Morrison is known for being sympathetic to women defendants. Marcus sighed. There's a hearing next week. The appeals court wants to review the case. Brent's hand clenched around the phone. They can't let her out. She tried to kill Emma. I know, but the legal system has loopholes. Her lawyer, Richard Pembroke, is one of the best appellate attorneys in the state. He's making this about mental health, coercion, and technically, Whitney never actually poisoned Emma with her own hands. She just gave her the pills. That's semantic nonsense. That's the law. Look, we're going to fight this. The prosecutor is prepared. But you need to be ready for the possibility that Whitney might get a reduced sentence or even a new trial. After hanging up, Brent stood frozen in the pharmacy's fluorescent light. The idea of Whitney walking free, of Emma having to face her mother again, of the justice they'd won slipping away. It was unbearable. Bad news, Molly asked gently. Whitney's appeal. Her lawyers are trying to get her sentence reduced. Can they do that? After everything she did? Apparently they can try. Brent pulled off his pharmacy coat. Cover for me? I need to make some calls. He drove to the park where Joanna was watching Emma play. His daughter had flourished in the past 6 months, back to her normal weight, excelling in school, smiling again. She was on the swings, laughing with friends. What's wrong? Joanna asked, reading his face. He explained the appeal, the legal maneuvering, the possibility of Whitney getting out. That's insane. She confessed. Confessions obtained through deception might not be admissible, according to her new lawyer. They're arguing I entrapped her into saying things she didn't mean. You got to be kidding me. I wish I was. Brent watched Emma swing higher, her dark hair flying. I can't let her win, Joe. I can't let Emma think that monsters get away with it if they're charming enough, if they hire good enough lawyers. So what are you going to do? Brent was quiet for a long moment. Something I should have done from the beginning. I'm going to make absolutely certain there's no way for Whitney or her lawyer to twist the truth. Meaning what? Meaning I'm going to find evidence, even they can't dispute. Something that proves Whitney's guilt so completely, so absolutely, that no appeals court can ignore it. Brent, the trial is over. You can't just manufacture new evidence. I'm not manufacturing anything. I'm finding what was always there. Whitney was methodical, calculating. She didn't just poison Emma on a whim. She planned it for months. There has to be more evidence, receipts, communications, something that proves premeditation beyond any doubt. Joanna studied him. You're going to investigate your own case. I'm going to finish what I started. Because if Whitney gets out, even on reduced charges, she'll come after Emma again. People like her don't stop. They just get more careful. That night, after Emma was asleep, Brent returned to the house he'd once shared with Whitney. It sat empty, listed for sale, a monument to a broken family. He'd avoided it for months, letting realtors handle the showings, unable to face the place where his wife had poisoned their child. But now he searched with purpose. The police had taken Whitney's computer, her phone, obvious evidence. But Brent knew his wife. She was paranoid about digital trails. She would have kept physical records too. He started in her office, pulling books from shelves, checking for hidden compartments. Nothing. He moved to the bedroom, searching through drawers that still held her clothes, smelling faintly of her perfume. In the back of her closet, behind a box of old photo albums, he found it. A locked metal box he'd never seen before. Small enough to hide, heavy enough to contain something important. He broke the lock with a hammer, heart pounding. Inside, journals. 3 of them, filled with Whitney's handwriting. Brent opened the first one, dated 2 years ago. Douglas showed me how easy it would be. Insurance policies pay so much for childhood deaths. Brent would be devastated, of course, but he'd get over it. I'd finally be free from this life, from playing mother to a child I never really wanted. Sometimes I look at Emma and feel nothing. Is that normal? His hand shook as he read further. Research suggests mixing adult medications slowly causes organ failure that mimics natural disease. Acetaminophen for liver damage, sleeping pills for neurological issues. Doctor won't suspect abuse if it's gradual. Met with Douglas today. He's charming, so different from Brent. He understands ambition. Brent's content to count pills forever, but I want more. The life insurance policy on Emma is $500,000. Douglas takes 30%. That leaves me $350,000 to start over. Forge Brent's signature on the policy today. So easy. He never pays attention to the mail anyway. Started the vitamins yesterday. Emma complained they tasted weird, but she took them. Good girl. This will take months, but Douglas says slow is safer. Entry after entry, documenting her premeditation, her complete lack of remorse, her calculations about Emma's declining health. It was a roadmap of child murder, written in Whitney's own hand. The final entry was dated 3 days before Brent discovered the truth. Emma's getting sicker faster than expected. Doctor wants to hospitalize her. Douglas says that's perfect. Natural causes will be easier to prove if she dies in hospital care. I almost feel bad when she cries, But then I think about the money and everything I can do with my new life. Brent suspects nothing. He's too trusting. Always has been. Brent closed the journal, ball rising in his throat. This was worse than he'd imagined. Whitney hadn't been manipulated by Gentry. She'd been an eager, willing participant, maybe even the instigator. He photographed every page, then called Marcus Webb. I found something. Journals. Whitney documented everything. The planning, the execution, her complete awareness and intent. Journals? Where? Hidden in our old house. I'm photographing everything now. This proves premeditation beyond any doubt. No appeal lawyer can claim coercion when she wrote, "I almost feel bad when she cries about our dying daughter." Marcus was quiet. "Brent, I need to ask, did you plant these journals?" "What? No. Why would you?" "Because if Whitney's lawyer can suggest you manufactured evidence to support your case, it could backfire. You can't just find new evidence months after the trial without it looking suspicious. I didn't manufacture anything. These are real. Her handwriting, her thoughts, dated entries that match Emma's medical timeline. Then we need to get them authenticated immediately. Handwriting expert, forensic dating of the paper and ink, everything. And we need to explain why you didn't find them earlier. I avoided the house. I couldn't face it. Only came back tonight because of the appeal. That's the truth. That's the truth." Marcus exhaled. "Okay, bring me everything tomorrow. I'll get experts on it. If these journals are authentic, and we can prove it, they'll shut down Whitney's appeal permanently." Brent gathered the journals carefully, preserving them like the evidence they were. As he left the house for what he hoped was the last time, he thought about Whitney's words. Brent's too trusting. Always has been. She'd been wrong. He'd been trusting. Past tense. Now he was just determined. Chapter 8. The Final Verdict. The appeals hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning in October. Brent sat in the courtroom's front row, Marcus Webb beside him, the authenticated journals now part of the official record. The handwriting experts had confirmed. Every entry was written by Whitney Ramirez. The ink and paper dated correctly to the timeline she described. The content matched Emma's medical records with perfect accuracy. There was no possibility of forgery or manipulation. Whitney's lawyer, Richard Pembroke, was a silver-haired man with an expensive suit and tired eyes. He tried to challenge the journal's admissibility, claiming they were obtained illegally from private property. Judge Morrison, a stern woman with glasses and no patience for games, had shut that down immediately. Mr. Ramirez owned the house jointly. He had every legal right to search it. The journals are admissible. Now, Pembroke stood before the three-judge appellate panel, making his final argument for why Whitney deserved a reduced sentence. "Your Honors, my client was a victim of psychological manipulation by Douglas Gentry, a known predator who targeted vulnerable women. While Ms. Ramirez's actions were reprehensible, they occurred under duress and coercion. The original sentence of 45 years fails to account for her diminished capacity." "Mr. Pembroke," Judge Morrison interrupted, "have you read the journals Mr. Ramirez submitted?" "I have, Your Honor, but I question their authenticity. They've been authenticated by 3 separate experts, and they paint a picture of a woman who is fully aware of her actions, calculating in her methodology, and completely unremorseful about slowly poisoning her 8-year-old daughter for money." Morrison's voice was ice. "Where, exactly, is the coercion? Douglas Gentry influenced her thinking. She wrote, and I quote, 'I look at Emma and feel nothing.' Is that normal?" "That's not coercion, Mr. Pembroke. That is sociopath documenting her own lack of empathy." The other judges nodded. The lead appellate judge, a man named Vincent Torres, leaned forward. "Mr. Pembroke, your client wrote detailed plans to murder her child. She researched exactly how to do it. She forged insurance documents. She documented her victims' suffering and expressed anticipation for the payout. What possible argument justifies reducing her sentence?" Pembroke tried several more angles: mental health, battered person syndrome, Gentry's manipulation. But each argument crumbled against Whitney's own written words. Finally, Judge Torres spoke. "We've reviewed the case thoroughly. The original conviction was sound. The evidence is overwhelming. The journals submitted by Mr. Ramirez only further confirm what the trial established. Whitney Ramirez deliberately, methodically, and remorselessly attempted to murder her daughter for financial gain. There is no basis for appeal. The original sentence of 45 years is affirmed. The gavel struck. Brent closed his eyes, relief flooding through him. Additionally, Judge Morrison added, "We are recommending that Ms. Ramirez never be granted parole. The nature of her crime, the complete lack of remorse, and the continued danger she poses to her daughter and society make her rehabilitation unlikely. This court recommends she serve her full sentence without possibility of early release." Whitney, sitting between guards at the defense table, finally showed emotion. Her face crumpled, tears streaming. No, you can't do this. I'm a mother. I deserve a second chance. You poisoned your child, Morrison said coldly. You documented your enjoyment of her suffering. You planned her death for money. You don't get second chances, Ms. Ramirez. You get consequences. As guards led Whitney away, she screamed at Brent, "You did this. You ruined everything. Emma was my daughter." "No," Brent said quietly, standing. "Emma is my daughter, and she's alive despite you." Whitney's screams echoed down the hallway until doors closed, muffling her rage. Outside the courthouse, Brent faced a small gathering of press. He'd avoided media for months, but Marcus had suggested he make a statement. Some closure, some final word. "Mr. Ramirez," a reporter called, "how does it feel to know your wife will spend her life in prison?" "It feels like justice," Brent said simply. "My wife tried to kill our daughter for money. She planned it, executed it, and showed no remorse. The sentence she received is appropriate." What about Douglas Gentry? His appeal was also denied this week. Good. Gentry murdered at least 8 children and attempted to murder more. He's a serial killer who found a legal way to profit from child deaths. He should never see freedom again. What message do you have for other parents who might be in similar situations? Brent paused, choosing words carefully. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong with your child's care, investigate. Don't assume doctors have all the answers. Don't trust blindly. And if you discover someone is harming your child, document everything, gather evidence, and protect your child first. Justice can come later, but safety is immediate. One more question. Do you consider yourself a hero? No. I'm a father who protected his daughter. That's not heroism. That's the basic requirement of being a parent. He glanced at Joanna, who stood nearby with Emma. The real heroes are the people who supported us. My sister, Dr. Cuevas, the FBI agents who believed me, the prosecutors who fought for justice. I just did what any parent should do. As they drove back to their apartment, Emma chatted about school from the back seat, blissfully unaware of the morning's legal victory. She knew her mother was in jail for hurting people, but Brent had shielded her from the full horror. That knowledge would come later, when she was older, with the help of therapists and time. "Dad," Emma asked, as they pulled into the parking lot, "can we get ice cream? You promised if you won in court." "I did promise. How about we call Aunt Jo and make it a celebration?" "Yes. Can I get cookie dough?" "You can get whatever you want, sweetheart." At the ice cream shop, Brent watched his daughter laugh with Joanna, chocolate already smeared on her chin. She was healthy, happy, safe. The opposite of the pale, sick child Whitney had been systematically destroying. His phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Cuevas. Heard the news. Justice served. "How's Emma?" "Perfect," Brent typed back. "Eating ice cream and being a kid. That's the best medicine." "Good work, Brent. You saved her life." Had he just corrected a situation he should have prevented? The guilt still lingered. The months he'd trusted Whitney, the signs he'd missed, the time Emma had suffered while he remained oblivious. "Stop it," Joanna said quietly, reading his expression. "I can see you spiraling. You did everything right. You caught it, stopped it, and got justice. Emma is alive because of you. She almost died because I was blind. You were trusting your wife. That's normal. What's not normal is Whitney being a psychopathic killer. You can't blame yourself for not predicting the unpredictable." Brent nodded, but the weight remained. Maybe it always would. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Brent received an unexpected visitor. Hassan Lynch stood at his door, thinner than Brent remembered, with a haunted look of someone who'd spent time in federal prison. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," Hassan said before Brent could speak. "But I'm out on supervised release, and part of my parole is making amends. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. What I did was unforgivable. I chose money over a child's life, over our friendship. I've had 2 years to think about that, and it eats me alive every day." Brent stared at his former colleague. "Why are you really here, Hassan?" "Because you deserve to hear it from me, not from lawyers or courts. I betrayed you. I was willing to lie and send you to prison so I could pay off gambling debts. Emma could have died because I didn't do the right thing." Hassan's voice cracked. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I know. And I'm sorry." Okay. You said what you came to say. I heard it. Now leave." Hassan nodded, turned to go, then paused. "For what it's worth, what you did, stopping Whitney and Gentry, saving Emma, that took real courage. You're a good man, Brent. I wish I'd been more like you." After Hassan left, Brent stood in his doorway for a long time. Some apologies couldn't fix what was broken. Some betrayals left permanent scars. But Emma was safe. Whitney was in prison forever. Gentry would die behind bars. The system, flawed as it was, had worked this time. Justice, Brent thought, tasted bitter and sweet all at once. Like the best medicine. Chapter 9. The Cure. 1 year later, Brent stood in a new pharmacy, his own. The shop was small but well-stocked, located in a quiet neighborhood, where people knew his story but respected his privacy. The sign above the door read, "Ramirez Family Pharmacy." Emma had helped design the logo, a mortar and pestle surrounded by flowers. She'd insisted on the flowers. Grand opening. Molly Glass called from the front counter, where a small crowd had gathered. Neighbors, former colleagues, even Dr. Burton Cuevas had come to support Brent's new venture. After everything that had happened, Brent had decided to leave his old pharmacy job and start fresh. This place was his. No memories of Whitney, no associations with Hassan's betrayal. Just clean counters, organized shelves, and the opportunity to help people. "Thank you all for coming," Brent addressed the crowd. "This pharmacy represents a new chapter for my family. A place built on trust, care, and doing what's right. Every prescription filled here will be checked twice, every patient treated with respect, and every child protected." The crowd applauded. Emma beamed from beside Joanna, wearing a special junior pharmacist name tag Brent had made for her. As the morning progressed, Brent filled prescriptions, counseled patients, and felt something he hadn't experienced in over a year: peace. This was his purpose, helping people, using his knowledge for good, making sure medications healed instead of harmed. "Mr. Ramirez?" A woman approached the counter, nervous. "I'm Margaret Reynolds. My son, Tyler. He was one of Douglas Gentry's victims." Brent remembered the name. Tyler Reynolds, age 7, died of natural causes 3 years ago. Gentry's consultation with the mother's ex-husband had occurred 2 months before Tyler's death. "Mrs. Reynolds, I'm so sorry for your loss. I wanted to thank you. Before you caught Gentry, I thought Tyler's death was my fault, that I'd missed signs of illness, that I'd been a bad mother. But it wasn't illness. It was murder. And knowing that, it doesn't bring him back, but it gives me peace. I wasn't a bad mother. I was a victim of a monster." Her voice broke. "You gave me that gift. You gave all the families that gift. So thank you." Brent didn't know what to say. He'd been so focused on saving Emma, on getting justice, that he hadn't fully considered the other families affected by Gentry's crimes. "Tyler deserved better," he finally said. "All those children did. I just wish I'd stopped Gentry sooner." "You stopped him when you could. That's all any of us can do." She squeezed his hand. "I hope you and Emma have beautiful lives. You both earned it." As the day wound down and customers filtered out, Brent locked the door and turned off the lights. Emma sat in his office, coloring while he finished paperwork. "Dad," she asked, not looking up from her drawing, "are you happy now?" The question surprised him. "What do you mean, sweetheart? You seemed sad for a long time, even when you smiled. But today you seem really happy." Kids noticed everything. Brent set down his pen and pulled Emma into his lap. "I am happy. Because we're safe, we have this new pharmacy, and you're healthy. That's everything I wanted. I don't remember much about being sick, Emma admitted. Just that my head hurt and I was tired all the time. And Mommy gave me vitamins. This was the moment. The therapist had said Emma would eventually ask, and Brent should be honest. Age appropriate, but honest. Sweetheart, those weren't vitamins. Mommy was giving you pills that made you sick. She did a very bad thing, which is why she's in jail. Emma processed this, her face serious. Did she not love me? The question pierced his heart. I think Mommy was sick in a different way. Sick in her mind. And that sickness made her do terrible things. But that's not about you, Emma. You're wonderful and perfect and lovable. What Mommy did was her choice, her problem. Never yours. Do you think she still thinks about me? I don't know. Maybe. But what matters is that you're safe now, and you never have to see her again unless you choose to when you're older. Emma nodded, seeming satisfied with this answer. I'm glad you're my dad. You saved me. You saved me too, kiddo, by being brave and strong. They sat together in comfortable silence, father and daughter, survivors of something unspeakable. Brent's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Webb. Final news. Gentry died in prison yesterday. Stabbed by another inmate who lost a child. Thought you should know. Brent stared at the message. He should feel something, satisfaction, closure, maybe even guilt. But all he felt was nothing. Douglas Gentry was gone, removed from the world by violence. The same violence he'd inflicted on innocents. Karma, maybe, or justice of a different kind. He wouldn't tell Emma. She didn't need to know that monsters could be killed by other monsters. She just needed to know she was safe. Time to go home, Brent said, lifting Emma off his lap. Aunt Joe's making dinner. As they locked up the pharmacy and walked to their car, Emma slipped her small hand into his. Dad, will you teach me about medicine when I'm older? How to help people like you do? Brent smiled. If that's what you want, absolutely. But you can be anything you want to be. Doctor, artist, astronaut. Whatever makes you happy. I think I want to help people. Like you helped me. Then I'll teach you everything I know. The Phoenix sunset painted the sky in oranges and purples as they drove home. Brent thought about the past year and a half. The horror of discovery, the fear of almost losing Emma, the satisfaction of trapping his enemies, the relief of justice. He'd started as a trusting husband, a careful pharmacist, a good father. He'd been forced to become an investigator, a strategist, a protector at any cost. But now he was just Brent again. Dad to Emma, brother to Joanna, pharmacist to his community. The scars remained, the wariness around pill bottles, the background checks he ran on anyone who got close to Emma, the nightmares that still came sometimes. But scars were proof of survival. Proof you'd fought something hard and won. At home, Joanna had made Emma's favorite, spaghetti and meatballs. They ate together, three people who'd been forged into a family by trauma, but stayed together by choice and love. To new beginnings, Joanna toasted with her water glass. To new beginnings, Brent agreed. And to beating the bad guys, Emma added, making them laugh. Later, after Emma was asleep and Joanna had gone home, Brent stood in his daughter's doorway watching her breathe. Healthy breaths, peaceful sleep, the simple miracle of a child who'd survived. He thought about Whitney, locked in a cell for the rest of her life. He thought about Gentry, dead in prison. He thought about Hassan, trying to rebuild a life destroyed by greed. Everyone had faced consequences for their choices. And Brent had made his choices too, to protect his daughter at any cost, to seek justice methodically and completely, to trap his enemies in their own lies. Those choices have been difficult, sometimes ethically gray, occasionally pushing legal boundaries. But Emma was alive, and sometimes that was the only measurement that mattered. He closed her door gently and walked to his home office. On his desk sat a framed photo. Emma at 8 years old, healthy and smiling, holding her junior pharmacist badge. Beside it, a folded note from Dr. Cuevas. You did good, Brent. You did what a father should do. Be proud. Brent allowed himself that pride. Not for revenge, not for justice, but for the simple act of saving his daughter's life when the system failed, when his wife betrayed them, when monsters moved in darkness. He'd been smart. He'd been strong. He'd been badass enough to take them all down. And in the end, the good guy had won. The villain had lost. And Emma, beautiful, brave Emma, got to grow up. That was the cure for everything. That was the story worth telling. And as Brent closed his laptop and headed to bed, he realized he could finally sleep without nightmares, without fear, without the weight of unfinished business. The poison was gone. The antidote had worked. And tomorrow, he'd wake up and do what he did best. Help people, protect his daughter, and live a life built on truth and trust. Because in the end, that's all any of us can do. Choose good, fight evil, protect the innocent, and measure our success not by revenge, but by the lives we save. Emma's life. That was Brent Ramirez's masterpiece. And it was worth every bitter pill he'd had to swallow to protect it. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Welcome home, stranger. The rain hammered against the windshield as Staff Sergeant Robert Bobby Sullivan pulled into the driveway of what used to feel like home. 15 months in Afghanistan, and before that, 6 months dealing with his mother's deteriorating health via video calls and worried text messages. When the call came that she'd passed, the Army granted him emergency leave to handle the funeral and settle her affairs. Now, at 42, Bobby had decided to take early retirement. 20 years of service, 3 deployments, and a chest full of commendations. He'd given enough. His plan was simple. Come home, be a father to Trevor and Jessica, and maybe salvage what was left of his marriage to Linda after years of distance and deployment strain. The house looked different. New garden lights lined the walkway, and there was a sleek black BMW in the driveway he didn't recognize. Linda had mentioned getting a new car, but this looked expensive, more than they could afford on her teacher's salary and his military pay. Bobby grabbed his duffel bag and approached the front door. Strange, the lock felt different when he inserted his key. After some fumbling, it finally turned. The foyer was darker than he remembered, with new furniture and a scent he couldn't place. Something sweet and unfamiliar. Linda? Kids? His voice echoed through the house. Trevor appeared at the top of the stairs. At 17, his son had grown taller, broader. The kid Bobby remembered as eager to hear war stories now looked down at him with something resembling contempt. "Oh, you're back." Trevor's tone was flat, unwelcoming. "Yes, son. I'm home for good this time." Bobby forced a smile. "Where's your mom?" "Out with friends." Trevor descended the stairs slowly, deliberately. "Look, we need to talk about some ground rules while you're here." "While you're here." The words hit Bobby like a slap. Ground rules. Jessica emerged from the kitchen, now 15 and barely recognizable. She'd always been Daddy's little girl, but the young woman standing before him regarded him like a stranger. "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Hey, sweetheart." Bobby moved to hug her, but she stepped back. "Trevor's right," Jessica said. "Things are different now. We've been managing fine without you." Bobby felt something cold settle in his stomach. "I'm your father. This is my house." "Actually," Trevor said, pulling out his phone, "Mom's been paying all the bills, and we've established some boundaries that work for our family." "Our family? I'm part of this family." Trevor walked to the bathroom, and Bobby heard the distinct sound of a deadbolt being installed. When his son emerged, he was holding a new key. "We need boundaries. The bathroom is off limits unless you ask permission first." Bobby stared at his son, disbelief washing over him. "You changed the locks on the bathroom?" "Among other things." Trevor pocketed the key. "Also, mealtimes are scheduled. If you want to eat with us, you need to ask. We've gotten used to our routine." The rain continued to pound outside, and Bobby felt as though he was still standing in it. Cold, exposed, unwelcome. What the hell happened to this family? Jessica appeared in the kitchen doorway, stirring something in a pot. Soup from the smell of it. He's right, Dad. You're not really a guest here, but you're not. Well, things have changed. It might be awkward if you just assumed everything would go back to how it was. The words hung in the air like smoke. Bobby looked between his children, these strangers wearing familiar faces, and felt the first stirrings of something he'd learned to recognize in combat zones. The feeling that came just before everything went to hell. "Where's your mother?" he asked again. "Book club," Jessica said quickly. "She'll be back late." At 11 p.m., Bobby sat alone in the living room when Linda finally came home. She smelled like wine and that same unfamiliar cologne he'd noticed in the foyer. Her hair was different, styled in a way that took effort. Her clothes were newer, more expensive. "Bobby," she didn't seem surprised to see him. "I wasn't sure when you'd get back. 3 days ago, I called and told you I'd be home tonight." Linda set down her purse and avoided his eyes. "Right. Well, you look good. Tired but good." He studied his wife of 19 years. Something fundamental had shifted. The way she held herself, the way she looked at him, or rather, didn't look at him. "Linda, what's going on here?" "The kids are treating me like a stranger." "They're protecting themselves," Linda said quietly. "You've been gone a lot, Bobby. More than you've been here. They've learned to depend on each other, on me. It's not personal." "Not personal?" Bobby stood up. "My son changed the locks on the bathroom and told me I need permission to eat. How is that not personal?" Linda finally met his eyes, and what he saw there was worse than anger. It was indifference. "Maybe you should sleep in the guest room tonight, until we figure things out." The guest room, in his own house. Bobby nodded slowly, filing this moment away in the same mental compartment where he kept track of enemy movements and threats to be dealt with later. "Sure," he said, "just until we figure things out." As Linda headed upstairs, Bobby noticed she was texting someone. The soft smile on her face as she typed was one he remembered, but it hadn't been directed at him in years. Chapter 2. The New Normal. The next few weeks established a routine that felt more like psychological warfare than family life. Bobby woke each morning in the guest room to the sounds of his family going about their business without him. Trevor and Jessica had perfected the art of civil indifference, speaking to him only when necessary and treating his requests like impositions. The bathroom situation was the most humiliating. Every time he needed to use it, he had to find Trevor or ask Linda for the key. Sometimes they were busy or didn't hear him. He'd started using the half bath in the basement, a cramped space that smelled of mildew and felt more like a prison cell. Meals were worse. The family ate together at specific times, and Bobby was expected to ask if he could join them. When he did, conversation died. When he didn't, he'd find the kitchen cleaned and put away, forcing him to fend for himself. "This is temporary," Linda kept saying when he confronted her. "We just need time to adjust." But Bobby had spent 20 years reading hostile territory, and this wasn't adjustment, this was occupation. His own family had taken control of his home and were systematically making him unwelcome. The financial picture was becoming clearer too. Linda had indeed been paying the bills, but from accounts Bobby didn't have access to. His military pension and savings had been rerouted to new accounts he hadn't opened. When he asked about it, Linda produced papers he didn't remember signing. "You gave me power of attorney before your last deployment," she explained, showing him documents that looked legitimate. "For emergencies. I've been managing everything." Bobby examined the papers. His signature looked right, but he had no memory of signing them. The dates were from 18 months ago, during a particularly difficult period when his mother's health was declining and he was dealing with combat stress. It was possible he'd signed them and forgotten, but something felt wrong. More unsettling were the changes in the house itself. New furniture, new electronics, renovations to the kitchen and master bedroom. When Bobby calculated the costs, they far exceeded Linda's teaching salary. "My father left me some money," Linda explained when he questioned the expenses. But Bobby knew Linda's father was still alive and hadn't spoken to his daughter in years. Then there was the BMW in the driveway. When Bobby asked to borrow it for a job interview, Linda claimed it was a lease through the school district for teachers who drove to multiple campuses. But Bobby had checked with 2 other teachers from Linda's school, and no such program existed. The breaking point came 3 weeks after his return. Bobby had been applying for civilian jobs, but his military skills didn't translate easily to the suburban job market. The interviews were going poorly, partly because he was staying in hotels near the interview locations rather than commuting from home. Linda insisted the guest room was too disruptive for him to have a good night's sleep before important meetings. When Bobby returned from a particularly discouraging interview in the city, he found suitcases in the foyer. "We're going to visit my sister in Colorado," Linda announced. 2 weeks. Jessica has never seen the mountains, and Trevor could use the break before senior year. "Great," Bobby said. "When do we leave?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. Trevor and Jessica exchanged glances with their mother. "Actually," Linda said carefully, "we thought you might want to stay here. To job hunt. Use the quiet time to get settled." Bobby felt that familiar combat zone sensation again. "You're going on a family vacation without me." "It's not a vacation, it's without me," Bobby repeated. Linda's facade of concern dropped slightly. "Bobby, you've been gone for most of their lives. They need some space to process your being back. And frankly, so do I." Trevor stepped forward. "Plus, someone should watch the house." Jessica nodded, still stirring soup at the stove. "Always stirring something, that kid. We'll bring you back something nice." Bobby looked at his family, really looked at them. This wasn't about adjustment or space or processing. This was about removing him entirely. "How long have you been planning this trip?" "We booked it last month," Linda said. "Before we knew exactly when you'd be back." "Last month." Bobby nodded. "Before you knew I'd taken early retirement and was coming home permanently." "Right." But Bobby had called Linda 6 weeks ago to tell her about his retirement decision and his mother's worsening condition. He'd called again 4 weeks ago to update her on the funeral arrangements, and 3 weeks ago to confirm his travel home. They had planned this vacation knowing he'd be here. They had planned to leave him behind. "When do you leave?" he asked quietly. "Tomorrow morning," Trevor said. "Early flight." "We'll leave you some money for groceries," Jessica added, as if that made it better. "And we're taking the BMW," Linda said. "There's a rental car waiting at the airport, but obviously we can't leave the car there for 2 weeks. Bobby felt something shift inside him, like tumblers falling into place in a lock. "Obviously, the keys to your truck are in the kitchen drawer," Linda continued. "But honestly, you should probably just stay local. Save money on gas while you're job hunting." They were taking the car keys. All of them. Even to his own truck that he'd paid for with his military savings. "Just to be safe," Trevor added, reading his father's expression. "Mom's worried about the insurance if something happened while we're away." Bobby nodded slowly. "Sure. Makes sense." That night, as his family finished packing for their trip, Bobby sat in the guest room and made a decision. For 20 years, he'd followed rules of engagement. He'd shown mercy to enemies who surrendered. He'd protected civilians and followed the laws of war. But this wasn't war. This was betrayal. And Bobby Sullivan had never been good at forgiving betrayal. He pulled out his phone and started making calls. Old Army buddies who owed him favors. Military contacts who worked in civilian intelligence now. People who understood that some situations required a different kind of operation. If his family wanted to play games, Bobby would show them what it meant to face someone who'd spent 2 decades learning how to break enemy strongholds. The gloves were coming off. Chapter 3. What I Did Next. Bobby watched from the guest room window as the taxi pulled away, carrying his family to the airport. Linda had left exactly $43 on the kitchen counter, enough for maybe a week of basic groceries if he was careful. The refrigerator contained half a gallon of milk, some condiments, and leftovers from meals he hadn't been invited to share. They had taken all the car keys, including his truck keys, just as Linda promised. But what they hadn't counted on was Bobby's particular set of skills and the network he'd built over 20 years of military service. The first call was to Sergeant Major Rick Howell, now working private security in Denver. "Bobby fucking Sullivan." Rick's voice boomed through the phone. "Heard you retired. What's the situation?" "I need surveillance on my family. They're flying into Denver this morning. I'll send you their info." "Roger that. What are we looking for?" "Everything. Who they meet, where they go, who my wife calls. Full package." "Copy. How deep do you want me to dig?" Bobby looked around the empty house, thinking about the BMW, the mysterious income, the power of attorney he didn't remember signing, all the way to bedrock. The second call was to Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Hayes, now working for a private investigation firm in D.C. Bobby, good to hear from you. I heard about your mom. I'm sorry. Thanks, Pat. I need a full financial workup on my wife. Banking, credit, income sources, the works. Plus, I need these documents analyzed. He photographed the power of attorney papers and sent them over. How fast do you need this? Yesterday. I'll have preliminary results by tonight. The third call was to Marcus Webb, a tech specialist who'd served under Bobby in Afghanistan and now ran a cybersecurity firm. Captain Sullivan, what can I do for you? I need complete digital surveillance on my family. Phone records, social media, email, everything. And I need it done quietly. Legal. Then my family. I'm on all the accounts. Then we're good. I'll set up remote access to everything within the hour. By noon, Bobby had his war room established in the basement. 3 laptops borrowed from Marcus, secure communication links to his team, and a growing file of intelligence on his own family's activities. The first report started coming in around 2 p.m. Rick's surveillance team had followed Linda, Trevor, and Jessica from the Denver airport to the Ritz-Carlton downtown. Not exactly the budget family trip Linda had described. More interesting, they weren't alone. A man had met them at the airport, tall, dark hair, expensive clothes. He'd kissed Linda, not a friendly peck, a real kiss. Patricia's financial investigation was revealing even more interesting details. Linda had 3 bank accounts Bobby didn't know about, with deposits totaling over $180,000 in the past year. Her teacher's salary was being supplemented by regular payments from something called Torres Development LLC. Bobby ran Torres Development through military databases and business registries. It was a property development company owned by Kevin Torres, a local contractor who'd done work in their neighborhood. Bobby remembered the man vaguely. He'd renovated the Martinez house down the street and several others in the area. By evening, Marcus had broken into Linda's email and social media accounts. The evidence was overwhelming and damning. Linda and Kevin Torres had been having an affair for over 2 years. The email chains detailed their relationship, their business arrangements, and their plans for Bobby's return. Kevin had been financing Linda's lifestyle through shell companies and fictitious consulting payments. The BMW was registered to one of Kevin's businesses. But the worst part was the plan they discussed for Bobby's homecoming. They had orchestrated the entire humiliation campaign. Trevor and Jessica weren't naturally hostile. They had been coached. Turned against their father systematically with stories about how Bobby had abandoned them, how he'd chosen the army over his family, how he was dangerous and unstable from his combat deployments. The bathroom locks, the meal restrictions, the guest room, all of it had been Kevin's idea, designed to break Bobby's spirit and make him leave voluntarily. If he couldn't be driven away, the plan was to have him declared mentally unfit and committed to a psychiatric facility. Linda had already consulted with lawyers about having Bobby's military benefits transferred to her permanently. The vacation was the final phase. While they were gone, Kevin would move his things into the house officially. When they returned, Bobby would be presented with divorce papers and told to move out. If he refused, they would claim he was violent and unstable, using his military background against him. Bobby sat in the basement, reading through months of planning his own destruction, and felt something crystallize inside him. Not anger. Anger was hot and stupid. This was something colder, more focused. The same feeling he'd had when planning raids on high-value targets in Afghanistan. His phone rang. Rick, calling from Denver. Bobby, you need to hear this. Our guy with the directional mic caught some interesting conversation over dinner. Bobby listened to the audio recording. Kevin Torres discussing his real estate empire, built largely on fraudulent loans and shell companies. More interesting, Kevin was bragging about his plan to acquire Bobby's house through the divorce proceedings and flip it for a massive profit. There's more, Rick continued. Your wife isn't the only military spouse he's targeted. I've identified at least 3 other cases in the area where deployed servicemen's wives suddenly became interested in expensive renovations and new cars. Always with Torres Development doing the work. Bobby felt the pieces clicking into place. This wasn't just adultery. This was a systematic operation targeting military families, using deployed soldiers' absence to manipulate their wives and steal their assets. Rick, I need you to expand the surveillance. Find the other families he's targeted. Give me everything on Torres's business practices, his associates, his vulnerabilities. You planning something, Bobby? Bobby looked around the basement he'd been relegated to in his own home, thought about his children, turned against him by a man who made his living destroying military families. Thought about Linda, the woman he'd loved and protected and served for, now actively plotting his destruction. Yeah, Bobby said quietly. I'm planning something. Chapter 4, Building the Case. Bobby spent the next week transforming his basement exile into a command center that would have impressed his old intelligence officers. The walls were covered with photographs, financial documents, phone records, and relationship maps connecting Kevin Torres to his various schemes. The deeper Bobby dug, the more extensive Torres's operation became. The man wasn't just having affairs. He was running a sophisticated con targeting military families throughout the region. His method was consistent. Identify deployed servicemen with valuable assets, seduce their wives during their absence, manipulate the women into transferring financial control, then either marry them for their benefits or discard them once their resources were exhausted. Patricia's investigation had uncovered 7 other families that fit the pattern. In each case, the wife had suddenly developed expensive tastes during her husband's deployment, always funded by consulting work or family money that traced back to Torres's shell companies. 2 of the marriages had ended in divorce, with the husband losing everything. 3 others were currently in progress. The most heartbreaking case was Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, who'd returned from Iraq to find his wife Emma had drained their savings and sold their house to pay for medical expenses for her sick mother. Emma's mother had been dead for 5 years. The money had gone to fund a lavish lifestyle with Torres while Mike was in combat. When Mike discovered the truth, he'd suffered a mental breakdown and was currently in a VA psychiatric facility. Bobby studied Rodriguez's case file with particular interest. This was exactly what Torres and Linda had planned for him. A combination of financial ruin and psychological manipulation designed to make him appear unstable. The psychiatric commitment would have transferred his benefits permanently to Linda while making it nearly impossible for him to fight back legally. But Torres had made a mistake targeting Bobby Sullivan. The other victims had been junior enlisted men or mid-level NCOs without extensive intelligence training or the kinds of connections Bobby had cultivated. They'd fought alone and lost. Bobby wouldn't be fighting alone. Marcus's digital surveillance was providing real-time intelligence on Torres's activities. The man was currently in Denver, continuing to play the devoted boyfriend to Linda while simultaneously texting with 2 other military wives back home. His pattern was to maintain multiple relationships in various stages, some for immediate financial gain, others being groomed for future exploitation. Even more valuable was the intelligence on Torres's business operations. His real estate empire was built on mortgage fraud, with properties purchased using false information and shell companies. He'd been shifting assets between various LLCs to avoid taxes and creditors, creating a complex financial structure that looked legitimate on the surface, but was fundamentally fraudulent. Bobby had called in another favor from his time in Afghanistan, Captain Sarah Morrison, now working for the FBI's white-collar crime division. Without revealing his personal connection to the case, Bobby had provided her with carefully curated evidence of Torres's mortgage fraud and identity theft operations. "This is good work," Sarah had told him during their encrypted call. "Really good. How did you come across this intel?" "Anonymous tip led to some digging," Bobby replied. "How long before you can move on it?" "With evidence this solid? We could have warrants within the week. But I'm curious about your source." This level of detail suggests inside access. Military spouse got suspicious about her husband's sudden wealth. Bobby lied smoothly. Started documenting things before she came forward. The FBI investigation would be the anvil. Bobby was preparing to be the hammer. But first, he needed to deal with his children. Trevor and Jessica weren't just innocent victims in this. They'd actively participated in his humiliation. Bobby had always understood that children could be manipulated, but the level of coordination they'd shown suggested something more than simple coaching. Marcus's digital surveillance had revealed the truth. Both kids were being paid for their cooperation. Torres had set up bank accounts for them, supposedly for college funds, but the deposits correlated directly with Bobby's mistreatment. $500 for the bathroom lock installation, $1,000 for the guest room exile, $2,000 for the vacation exclusion. Torres hadn't just turned Bobby's children against him, he'd bought them. Jessica's constant soup stirring wasn't nervous energy. She'd been recording conversations on her phone, creating audio evidence of Bobby's unstable behavior that would be used in commitment proceedings. Every time she stirred that pot, she was positioning herself to capture his voice while appearing innocent. Trevor's boundary setting was more sophisticated. The kid had been documenting Bobby's reactions to their treatment, photographing any signs of anger or frustration that could be presented as evidence of violent tendencies. His phone contained dozens of photos of Bobby looking upset, angry, or confused, all taken without his knowledge. They'd been building a case against their own father for money. Bobby felt something die inside him as he reviewed the evidence. The children he'd loved and protected and missed during his deployments had sold him out for college money. There would be no forgiveness for this. Ever. His phone buzzed with a message from Rick in Denver. The surveillance team had captured something interesting at the hotel bar. The audio file Rick sent contained Linda and Kevin discussing their timeline. They would return tomorrow as planned. Bobby would be served with divorce papers immediately, along with a restraining order based on the evidence Trevor and Jessica had collected. If Bobby refused to leave voluntarily, Kevin would provoke a confrontation, record it, and use it to have Bobby committed. The kids did great, Kevin's voice said on the recording. Those photos Trevor got, and Jessica's audio recordings, it's exactly what we need to prove he's unstable. I just feel bad about the kids, Linda's voice replied. Having them lie to their father like that. They're getting paid better than most part-time jobs. Besides, they're old enough to understand their father abandoned them. We're just giving them financial security. Bobby listened to the recording 3 times. Linda's guilt was perfunctory at best. She was more concerned about the money than about destroying her children's relationship with their father. Tomorrow, they would come home expecting to find a broken man ready to surrender. Instead, they would find someone who had spent 2 decades learning how to destroy enemies who thought they were safe. Bobby made his final preparations. The anvil was in place. The hammer was ready to fall. Chapter 5. The Trap Springs. Bobby was waiting in the living room when the taxi pulled into the driveway. He'd spent the morning making the house look exactly as Linda expected to find it. Dirty dishes in the sink, unmade bed in the guest room, signs of depression and desperation scattered around for Trevor's cameras to capture. But hidden throughout the house were Marcus's recording devices, Patricia's hidden cameras, and Rick's surveillance equipment operated remotely from Denver. Every word, every action would be documented from multiple angles. Linda entered first, followed by Trevor and Jessica, all looking refreshed and relaxed from their 2-week vacation. They brought suitcases and shopping bags, souvenirs from a trip Bobby had paid for, but been excluded from. Bobby, Linda said, setting down her bags. We need to talk. About what? Bobby kept his voice level, giving Trevor nothing dramatic to photograph. Kevin Torres entered behind them, carrying his own luggage and making no attempt to hide his presence. He was exactly as Bobby had expected, tall, well-dressed, confident in the way men are when they believe they've already won. This is Kevin, Linda said unnecessarily. I think it's time you 2 met officially. Bobby looked at the man who'd been systematically destroying his family for 2 years. Kevin Torres. Torres Development, LLC. I've heard a lot about you. Kevin's confidence flickered slightly. Bobby, right? Linda's told me a lot about you, too. Look, I know this is awkward, but we're all adults here. Are we? Bobby stood up slowly. Because it seems like you've been playing games. With my wife, my children, my home. Trevor stepped forward with his phone ready, but Bobby's tone remained calm, his posture non-threatening. Dad, Kevin's been really good to us while you were gone. I'm sure he has. Bobby looked at his son. How much has he been paying you, Trevor? The question hit like a slap. Trevor's face went white. What? The bank account Kevin set up for you. $7,000 in deposits over the past 6 months. That's pretty good money for a high school student. Jessica stopped stirring the pot she'd automatically gravitated toward and turned around slowly. What are you talking about? Bobby looked at his daughter. Yours has 8,000. A little more because recording conversations is more technically demanding than just taking pictures. Kevin stepped forward, his hand moving toward Bobby in what could be interpreted as an aggressive gesture. Perfect. The cameras caught it all. I think you're confused, Bobby. Maybe you should. Sit down, Kevin. Bobby's voice carried the authority of 20 years commanding soldiers in combat. We're not done talking. Kevin hesitated, clearly trying to decide whether to escalate the situation physically. Bobby hoped he would. It would make things easier. Linda moved between them. Bobby, you're scaring the kids. Am I? Or are they scared because their little con game is falling apart? Bobby looked around at his family. Should I tell them what I know? Or do you want to? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Bobby could see Trevor and Jessica exchanging glances, their confidence evaporating as they realized their father wasn't the broken man they'd expected to find. I know about the financial fraud, Bobby continued. The shell companies, the mortgage schemes, the systematic targeting of military families. I know about the plan to have me committed to steal my benefits. I know about the recording devices and the photographs and the careful documentation of my supposed instability. Kevin's composure cracked completely. You don't know what you're talking about. Rodriguez, Wilson, Patterson, Martinez. Bobby recited the names like a roll call. 7 families you've destroyed so far. Mike Rodriguez is in a psychiatric facility because of you. Emma Wilson lost her kids when her husband came home to find everything gone. Should I keep going? Linda sank into a chair, her face pale. Bobby, I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do, Linda. You've been part of it for 2 years. The question is whether you're a victim or an accomplice. Bobby pulled out his tablet and played one of Kevin's recorded calls, the one where he bragged about his operation targeting military wives. Linda's face went from pale to gray as she heard Kevin's voice describing her as another conquest, and easier than most because she's so desperate for attention. You son of a bitch, Linda whispered, turning to Kevin. Kevin was backing toward the door, realizing the situation had shifted dramatically. Linda, don't listen to him. He's trying to manipulate you. With your own voice? Bobby played another recording. Kevin discussing how he planned to discard Linda once the house was transferred to his company. Trevor lowered his phone, the fight going out of him. Dad, we didn't know. You didn't know what? That taking money to destroy your father was wrong? That recording him secretly was a betrayal? What exactly didn't you know? Jessica started crying, but Bobby felt nothing. No sympathy, no forgiveness. They made their choice when they chose money over family. Kevin made his move then, pulling out his phone to call someone. This is harassment. I'm calling the police. Good idea, Bobby said. Ask for Agent Sarah Morrison from the FBI field office. Tell her you're Kevin Torres and you'd like to discuss your real estate investments. Kevin's phone call died in his throat. What? The FBI has been investigating Torres development for mortgage fraud. They have warrants ready to execute. All they needed was confirmation that you'd be in town. Bobby smiled for the first time in weeks. I gave them that confirmation this morning. As if summoned by his words, Bobby heard vehicles pulling into the driveway. Multiple vehicles. Car doors slamming. Heavy footsteps on the walkway. The knock on the door was authoritative and unmistakable. FBI, we have a warrant. Kevin Torres's face went white as Bobby opened the door to let in the agents. Agent Morrison was at the front of the team, and she nodded professionally to Bobby before turning to Kevin. Kevin Torres, you're under arrest for mortgage fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The agents moved efficiently, handcuffing Kevin while reading him his rights. Bobby watched with satisfaction as his family's destroyer was led away in shackles. But this was only the beginning. The hammer had fallen, but the anvil still had work to do. Chapter 6: Revelations and Reckonings. With Kevin Torres in federal custody, the house fell into stunned silence. Linda sat on the couch, staring at the spot where Kevin had been arrested. Trevor and Jessica huddled together, both crying now that the reality of their situation was sinking in. Bobby stood by the window, watching the FBI agents search Kevin's BMW. They'd find drugs. Marcus had planted cocaine in the glove compartment using his extensive knowledge of Kevin's daily routines. Not enough to suggest dealing, but enough to add federal drug charges to the financial crimes. Dad, Trevor's voice was small, broken. I'm sorry. We didn't understand what was happening. Bobby turned to face his son. The boy looked young again, stripped of the cocky confidence Kevin had built up in him. You understood enough to take the money. We thought. You thought what? That betraying your father for cash was acceptable? That recording me secretly was just a game. Bobby's voice remained calm, but there was ice in it that made Trevor step back. You built a case to have me committed to a psychiatric facility. For money. Jessica wiped her eyes. Kevin said you'd abandoned us. He said you chose the army over family, and we had to protect ourselves. And that made taking bribes to destroy me acceptable? Linda finally spoke, her voice hollow. Bobby, they're just kids. Kevin manipulated all of us. Bobby looked at his wife with the same cold assessment he'd once reserved for enemy combatants. You've been having an affair for 2 years, Linda. You've been planning to steal my home, my benefits, my freedom. At what point in that timeline were you manipulated into betraying your marriage vows? I was lonely. You were greedy. Bobby cut her off. Kevin's operation worked because you wanted it to work. You wanted the money, the attention, the new lifestyle. The manipulation was just convenient cover for what you already wanted to do. Bobby's phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. The financial investigation had revealed even more devastating information. He read it quickly, then looked up at his family. Linda, Kevin has been using you to target other military families. Your teacher contacts, your knowledge of deployment schedules, your access to military spouse social networks. He's been using that information to identify new victims. Linda's face went white. That's not true. Bobby showed her the evidence on his tablet. Email chains where Linda had provided Kevin with information about upcoming deployments, details about other military families' financial situations, even personal problems that could be exploited. Martha Peterson. You told Kevin about her husband's PTSD and their marital problems. He seduced her 6 months later while Tom was deployed to Syria. Susan Wright. You told Kevin about their son's medical bills and financial stress. He targeted her for a real estate investment scam that cost them their house. Linda stared at the evidence of her own complicity, her face crumbling as she realized the extent of her betrayal. Not just of Bobby, but of their entire military community. I didn't know he was using the information like that, she whispered. You gave it to him anyway. You helped him destroy our friends' lives. Bobby's voice was relentless. You're not a victim, Linda. You're an accomplice. Trevor looked at his mother with growing horror. Mom, you help him hurt other families? Linda couldn't answer. The weight of her actions was finally hitting her, and she seemed to be collapsing under it. Bobby felt no sympathy. For 20 years, he'd protected his family, his community, his country. While he was in combat zones defending freedom, his wife had been helping a predator destroy the very families Bobby was fighting to protect. His phone rang. Rick, calling from his surveillance position. Bobby, you need to know, Kevin made some calls from the federal building. We intercepted them. He's got insurance. What kind of insurance? The kind that threatens to expose other people's secrets if he goes down, including yours. Bobby stepped into the kitchen for privacy. What does he have on me? Financial records suggesting you've been using military resources for personal gain. Fabricated evidence, but sophisticated. He's also claiming you threatened him physically and that you've been stalking his business associates. Bobby felt a cold smile spread across his face. Let him try. Every conversation in this house has been recorded. Every action documented. If he wants to play that game, I got better cards. There's more. He's claiming your investigation into his business was conducted illegally. Says you're using military contacts to harass a civilian businessman. I'm a retired civilian who hired legitimate private investigators and reported suspected crimes to appropriate authorities. If he wants to claim otherwise, he'll need evidence. He might have it. Some of the methods Marcus used to access digital information weren't exactly legal. Bobby considered this. Kevin had been more sophisticated than he'd initially assessed. But Bobby had 20 years of experience in operations that required plausible deniability. Rick, did Marcus access any information we couldn't have obtained through legal means? Not really. Phone records are available through subpoena, financial records through court orders, and most of the digital evidence came from accounts Bobby was authorized to access as the spouse. Then we're clean. Kevin can claim whatever he wants, but he'll be claiming it from federal prison. Bobby returned to the living room, where his family was still dealing with the wreckage of their situation. Linda was on her phone, presumably calling her lawyer. Trevor and Jessica were whispering together, probably discussing their legal exposure. Bobby felt nothing for any of them. The man who had loved this family, who had protected them and sacrificed for them, had died during those 2 weeks of systematic humiliation and betrayal. What remained was someone who understood that mercy was a luxury he could no longer afford. Bobby, Linda said, hanging up her phone, my lawyer says we need to discuss how to handle this situation. For the kids' sake. The kids are accessories to conspiracy and fraud. They took money to participate in a scheme to have me illegally committed. They're lucky if criminal charges are the worst thing that happens to them. Trevor stepped forward. Dad, we'll pay the money back. All of it. And we'll testify against Kevin. Bobby looked at his son, this stranger who shared his DNA but had sold him out for cash. You'll testify against Kevin because that's the deal the FBI will offer you to avoid prison time. Don't pretend it's about making things right. Jessica found her voice. What do you want from us? The question hung in the air. What did Bobby want? Revenge? Justice? Reconciliation? Bobby looked around at his family, his betrayers, and realized what he wanted was very simple. He wanted them gone. Chapter 7. The Execution. 3 days after Kevin Torres's arrest, Bobby sat in his lawyer's office reviewing divorce papers. Not the papers Linda had planned to serve him, but the ones he was serving her. The documents were thorough, brutal, and entirely legal. You're sure about this? Attorney Margaret Foster asked, reviewing the settlement terms. You're essentially giving up all claim to reconciliation. There won't be any reconciliation, Bobby replied. I want them out of my life permanently. The divorce papers stripped Linda of everything. The house, purchased primarily with Bobby's VA loan and military benefits, would remain his. Linda's accounts, funded through her participation in Kevin's criminal enterprise, were being frozen by federal authorities. Her teacher's pension could be garnished to compensate Kevin's victims once the civil suits began. More importantly, Bobby was demanding sole custody of Trevor and Jessica, with Linda having only supervised visitation. Given their participation in the conspiracy against him and Linda's involvement in crimes affecting military families, family court would likely rule in Bobby's favor. But Bobby had no intention of actually taking custody of his children. He had a different plan for them. Margaret reviewed the custody arrangements one more time. The children will need representation, and Linda will fight this. Let her fight. I have documentation of their conspiracy, audio recordings of their planning sessions, and financial records of the bribes Kevin paid them. Plus Linda's own words implicating her in crimes against other military families. Bobby's phone buzzed with an update from Marcus. Kevin Torres had accepted a federal plea deal to avoid life in prison. In exchange for testifying against his network of accomplices and shell companies, he'd serve 15 years minimum. Part of his plea required full financial disclosure and victim compensation. Linda would be named as a co-conspirator in the federal case. Her cooperation in targeting military families, providing intelligence for Kevin's operations, and laundering money through fake consulting agreements made her an essential part of the criminal enterprise. She could face federal charges or accept a plea deal that would include significant financial penalties and probation. Either way, her teaching career was over. Her reputation in the military community was destroyed. Her financial future was ruins. Bobby felt no satisfaction in her destruction, only cold calculation. She had chosen her path when she chose to betray not just him, but the entire community they'd been part of for 20 years. The door to Margaret's office opened, and Linda, entered with her attorney, David Chun. Linda looked haggard, aged years in just a few days. The stress of Kevin's arrest and the federal investigation was showing. "Bobby," she said, her voice tentative, "we need to talk about the children. The children who took bribes to build a false case against me. Those children." David Chun leaned forward. "My client is willing to discuss financial arrangements and custody sharing. Your client has no financial assets that aren't connected to criminal activity," Margaret replied smoothly. "And her involvement in a conspiracy targeting military families makes her unsuitable for custody of military dependents." Linda started crying again. "Bobby, please. I know I made mistakes, but they're still your children." Bobby looked at the woman he'd once loved. "They stopped being my children when they took money to destroy me. You stopped being my wife when you helped a predator target our friends." "The money doesn't matter," Linda said desperately. "We can fix this. Family therapy, counseling, whatever it takes." "It takes trust," Bobby said quietly. "And trust, once broken, can't be repaired. I trusted you with my life, my future, my children. You sold all of it to the highest bidder." David Chun tried another approach. "Mr. Sullivan, your wife was manipulated by a sophisticated criminal. She's as much a victim as anyone." Bobby laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Victims don't spend 2 years planning their husband's imprisonment. Victims don't coach their children to betray their father. Victims don't help criminals target other families." Margaret placed a hand on Bobby's arm. "Mr. Sullivan, perhaps we should discuss the specific terms privately with Mrs. Sullivan's counsel." Bobby nodded and stood to leave. As he reached the door, Linda called out to him. "Bobby, what about forgiveness? What about second chances?" Bobby turned back to face her. "I spent 20 years in the military, Linda. I've seen what happens when you give second chances to people who've proven they can't be trusted. They get people killed. We're not in Afghanistan anymore, Bobby. This is family." Bobby felt something cold and final settle in his chest. "No, Linda, we were family. Now you're just another enemy I've defeated." As Bobby left the lawyer's office, his phone rang. Rick, calling with the final piece of intelligence Bobby had been waiting for. "Bobby, we found the other accounts." Kevin had hidden assets in offshore accounts that the FBI missed. About $2 million, probably stolen from victims over the years. "Can we access them?" "Marcus is working on it. But there's something else. Kevin had plans beyond just your family. He was building a network to target military families nationwide. Base housing complexes, deployment support groups, military spouse organizations. He was planning to franchise his operation." Bobby felt rage flicker through his cold calculation. Kevin Torres hadn't just destroyed individual families. He'd been planning to systematically prey on the entire military community. "Rick, I need you to get that information to the FBI. All of it. Already done. But Bobby, there's something you should know. Kevin's been talking to federal agents about some kind of deal. He's claiming he can provide information about other criminal networks targeting military families." Bobby smiled grimly. "Let him talk. Every word he says implicates Linda further and proves the children knew exactly what they were participating in." When Bobby arrived home, Trevor and Jessica were waiting for him in the living room. They looked smaller somehow, younger and more frightened than they had since his return. "Dad," Trevor said, "we need to talk about what happens next." Bobby sat down across from them and studied their faces. These children who had once run to greet him when he came home on leave, who had cried when he deployed, who had written him letters and sent him drawings and counted the days until his return. All of that was gone now, burned away by greed and betrayal. What remained were two strangers who had sold him out for college money. "What happens next," Bobby said quietly, "is that you both learn the consequences of the choices you made." Chapter 8. No Mercy. Bobby's final move came exactly 1 week after Kevin Torres' arrest. He had let Linda, Trevor, and Jessica believe they had time to negotiate, time to plan their defense, time to find some way to minimize the consequences of their betrayal. He wanted them to have hope before he took it away forever. The morning started with a knock on the door. Linda answered to find Agent Morrison and 2 other FBI agents with a search warrant for the house. Not for evidence of Kevin's crimes that had already been gathered. This warrant was for evidence of Linda's conspiracy and the children's participation in the scheme. Mrs. Sullivan, Agent Morrison said formally, "We have a warrant to search the premises and seize any documents, devices, or materials related to the conspiracy to defraud Robert Sullivan and other military families." Linda's face went white. "I thought Kevin's arrest ended this." "Mr. Torres's cooperation has provided us with extensive information about his accomplices. We'll need to speak with you and your children after we execute this warrant." Bobby watched from the kitchen as federal agents systematically dismantled his family's remaining illusions of safety. They seized phones, computers, tablets, and documents. They found the recording devices Jessica had used, the camera equipment Trevor had employed, and the detailed records Kevin had insisted they keep of Bobby's supposed instability. Every piece of evidence they had thought would destroy Bobby now became evidence of their own crimes. Trevor tried to approach his father as agents boxed up his electronics. "Dad, can you make them stop? Can you tell them we were just kids who didn't understand?" Bobby looked at his son with the same expression he'd once reserved for captured insurgents. "You understood enough to negotiate payment rates. You understood enough to coordinate your activities with a criminal conspiracy. You understood enough to document every detail for legal proceedings. We were scared," Jessica added. "Kevin said you'd be violent when you came back, that you'd hurt us. And yet you never once tried to warn me about Kevin's presence in my house. You never tried to protect your mother from a dangerous criminal. You only tried to protect the money you were being paid." Agent Morrison approached Bobby. "Mr. Sullivan, we'll need you to come in for a formal statement this afternoon. Your cooperation has been invaluable, but we need official testimony for the prosecutions." Bobby nodded. "How many prosecutions?" "Kevin Torres will plead guilty to 19 federal charges. Your wife will face conspiracy charges unless she accepts a plea deal. Your children." Morrison glanced at Trevor and Jessica. "Minors who participate in federal conspiracies can be tried as adults if the crimes are serious enough." Linda collapsed into a chair. "You're going to prosecute my children?" "Mrs. Sullivan, your children participated in a conspiracy to defraud a military veteran and commit him to psychiatric care under false pretenses. They documented their activities, accepted payment, and created false evidence. Age doesn't excuse federal crimes of this magnitude." Bobby felt nothing as he watched his family realize the full scope of their situation. No sympathy, no regret, no desire to help them. They had made their choices. That afternoon, Bobby sat in the FBI field office giving his formal statement. The process was familiar. He'd provided intelligence briefings hundreds of times during his military career. The difference was that this time, he was briefing on his own family's crimes. "Mr. Sullivan," Agent Morrison said, "your wife's attorney has indicated she's willing to provide full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. This would include testifying against her children if they don't accept plea deals." Bobby nodded. "Linda will do whatever protects Linda. She's already proven that. What about the children? Are you willing to support some kind of plea arrangement for them?" Bobby considered the question. Trevor and Jessica were minors, technically. They had been manipulated by Kevin Torres. A good defense attorney could probably get them reduced charges or even probation. But Bobby remembered the looks on their faces when they'd humiliated him. The casual cruelty in their voices when they treated him like a stranger in his own home. The calculation in their eyes when they counted their blood money. "Agent Morrison," Bobby said finally, "my children chose to participate in a conspiracy to destroy their father. They weren't forced into it. They were paid for it. They weren't protecting themselves. They were protecting their income stream. So you won't support lenient treatment? I'll support whatever justice demands. If that's adult charges for adult crimes, so be it." When Bobby returned home that evening, he found the house empty except for Linda. Trevor and Jessica had been taken to juvenile holding pending their arraignment. Linda sat alone in the living room, surrounded by the debris of the FBI's search. "Bobby," she said without looking up, "I've been thinking about what you said, about trust and second chances." Bobby said nothing, waiting. "You're right. I can't be trusted. None of us can. We prove that." Linda finally looked at him, her eyes red and hollow. But what I can't understand is how you could be so cold about your own children. Bobby sat down across from her. Those people who lived in this house for the past month weren't my children. My children loved me. My children would never have taken money to destroy me. They're the same people, Bobby. They just made terrible mistakes. No, Linda, mistakes are accidents. What they did was deliberate, calculated, and cruel. They stopped being my children the moment they chose money over family. Linda wiped her eyes. So what happens now? You destroy us all and walk away. Bobby looked around the house he'd fought to protect, that he'd dreamed of returning to during his deployments. It felt empty now, not because his family was gone, but because it had been empty all along. The people he'd loved had died long before he'd come home to discover it. I don't need to destroy you, Linda. You destroyed yourselves. I just documented it. Bobby's phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. The offshore accounts had been accessed, and the $2 million Kevin had hidden was being transferred to a victim compensation fund. Additionally, Marcus had discovered evidence of 3 more criminal networks using similar tactics against military families. The information would be passed to federal authorities anonymously. Kevin Torres's operation was just one tentacle of a larger predator network that fed on military families during their most vulnerable moments. Bobby stood up, looking down at the woman who had once been his wife. I'm going to pack my things. When the house is processed as evidence, you'll need to find somewhere else to live. Where will you go? Bobby smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt since coming home. Somewhere I can build a new life with people who understand the meaning of loyalty. As Bobby packed his belongings, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not for reconciliation or forgiveness, but for the future. A future where he would never again make the mistake of trusting people who had proven themselves untrustworthy. His phone rang one final time. Rick, calling from Denver. Bobby, it's over. Kevin Torres just accepted a 20-year plea deal. Full cooperation, full victim compensation, and he's giving up everyone in his network. What about Linda? Plea deal for 5 years probation and victim compensation. She'll never teach again, and she'll be paying damages for the rest of her life. And the kids? Juvenile court, but they'll be tried as adults if they don't accept responsibility. Their best option is plea deals with community service and restitution. Bobby felt a cold satisfaction settle over him. Justice, finally. Rick, I need one more favor. Name it. Help me disappear. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 6 months later, Bobby Sullivan sat on the porch of a small cabin in Montana, watching the sun rise over mountains that had never known betrayal. He'd bought the property with money from the sale of his former home. After the FBI released it from evidence, he'd sold it within a week and donated half the proceeds to military family support organizations. The cabin was isolated, peaceful, and exactly what Bobby needed to rebuild his life. He'd taken a job with a private security company that specialized in protecting military families from financial predators. The work was satisfying in a way that went beyond mere employment. He was using his experience to prevent other families from suffering what his had inflicted on him. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, who now worked as Bobby's partner in the security business. Torres' network completely dismantled. 14 arrests, 47 victims compensated. Your intelligence made it possible. Bobby smiled and set the phone aside. Kevin Torres was serving 20 years in federal prison. Linda was working as a retail clerk to pay victim compensation, her teaching credentials permanently revoked. She'd been disowned by the military spouse community she'd helped Kevin prey upon. Trevor and Jessica had accepted plea deals that included community service and restitution payments. They would graduate high school with federal criminal records and the knowledge that their choices had consequences. Bobby had not spoken to either of them since their arrests. He felt no guilt about any of it. They had chosen their paths when they chose money over family. Bobby had simply ensured their choices had appropriate consequences. A vehicle approached on the mountain road, a Jeep Bobby recognized. Sarah Morrison, the FBI agent who had led the Torres investigation, climbed out and approached the porch. Bobby, she said, accepting the coffee he offered. Thought you'd want to know the final numbers. Bobby listened as Sarah detailed the complete dismantling of the predator network that had targeted military families. 63 families have been victimized across 7 states. Kevin Torres's operation had been the largest, but not the only one. The intelligence Bobby had provided had led to the discovery and prosecution of an entire ecosystem of criminals who specialized in exploiting deployed servicemen. There's something else, Sarah continued. We've had inquiries from other federal agencies about your analytical work. If you're interested, there are opportunities in the private sector working with law enforcement. Bobby considered the offer. What kind of opportunities? Consulting on cases involving military families, financial crimes, domestic terrorism, organized conspiracy. Your understanding of how these predators operate could help us prevent future victims. Bobby looked out at the mountains, thinking about the families who might be saved from what his had endured. I'll consider it. After Sarah left, Bobby sat in the quiet of his new life and felt something he hadn't experienced in years: peace. Not the peace of reconciliation or forgiveness, but the peace of justice served and debts paid. His old life was gone, burned away by betrayal and greed. But from those ashes, he'd built something better, a life based on truth rather than illusion, on earned loyalty rather than assumed devotion. Bobby had learned the hardest lesson of his military career. Sometimes the enemy lives in your own home. But he'd also learned that victory was possible even in the face of ultimate betrayal, as long as you were willing to fight without mercy for what was right. His phone buzzed with another message. This one from Rick, who had moved to Montana to join Bobby's security company. New case just came in. Army Ranger, 3 deployments. Came home to find his family acting strange. Wife says he needs boundaries before he can rejoin the family. Sound familiar? Bobby smiled and reached for his keys. There was work to do. The old Bobby Sullivan, the man who believed in second chances and forgiveness, was dead and buried with his illusions about family loyalty. What remained was someone harder, colder, but infinitely more effective at protecting people who deserve protection. As Bobby drove down the mountain toward his new mission, he felt something that had been missing from his life for months. Purpose. Not the purpose of serving ungrateful people who would betray him at the first opportunity, but the purpose of protecting those who had earned protection and destroying those who preyed on the innocent. Bobby Sullivan had come home from war to find the real enemy waiting for him in his own living room. He defeated that enemy completely and without mercy. Now he was ready to find new enemies to defeat. The war was over. The mission continued. In the rearview mirror, Bobby could see the smoke rising from the valley where his old life had burned. Ahead, the mountain road stretched toward a future built on harder truths and earned trust. Bobby drove toward that future without looking back. Behind him lay the ashes of betrayal. Ahead lay the satisfaction of justice served and the promise that no one would ever again mistake his mercy for weakness. The homecoming was complete. The revenge was finished. The new life had begun. And Bobby Sullivan had never felt more at peace. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.